2025 meeting of the City Plan Board. Which one of you guys is handling the roll call? Mr. Chan, can you call us in?
Sure. Robert Ackerman. I'm here. Jamie Bell is absent. Tina Certain. Nicholas Hill.
Here.
Robert Murmur.
Here.
Joshua Ney.
Here.
Jason Sanchez.
Here.
And Stephanie Sutton is absent. We have a quorum.
Fantastic. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we approve the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of last meeting?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that is also approved. If there's anybody here that wants to speak about something that is not on the agenda, you just got something to get off your chest about the city of Gainesville, this is your time. We'll give you a few minutes to talk. If not, we'll just keep moving this show on. And if you could just state your name for the record. And need for us if you guys can start the clock too.
Hello, I'm Nick Gallo. Good to see you, Mr. Ackerman, and I believe Ms. Sutton's on the board.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, you helped us with our car wash permitting back in 2020, and I'm here to talk about a development going on at 4565 Northwest 13th Street. It is the conversion of an in-bay automatic car wash to an express tunnel car wash. It doesn't follow the same guidelines as any existing car wash, which normally express tunnel car wash in the city of Gainesville, such as Mod Wash about a half mile from them, Gallo Car Wash about a half mile from them, Caliber, Whistle on Tower Road, Whistle in Alachua, and then the Tux Car Wash that was not built because of it's so costly to build and meet the Gainesville code. They did not develop the ABC liquor on Archer into a car wash after you had to exit with a bay not facing a main road. So I kind of became aware of the development at the car wash show in Las Vegas. The project manager, Malachi Partridge, was trying to get our business, saw Gainesville on the tag. He said, I've got news for you. I've got a way to circumvent difficult permitting things. The original game plan was for them to break ground on Memorial Day and complete all work on weekends and holidays, so they could avoid having to meet building codes, do regulations. That kind of got thwarted. It was brought up they didn't have a permit. They were building without a permit. And so then they submitted plans to tear up a little bit of asphalt at the site, which you can see. And they've torn out all the equipment, and they say, hey, we're just putting a new in-bay automatic in. And if you talk to anybody at the site who works for them, they're saying, we are just doing an upgrade. There's no construction, but they're actually going to either install a conveyorized car wash or a dual belt conveyor from STI or AVW, and it would not meet the codes of it points towards residential. The residential is Meadowbrook Estates. It's only about 360 feet away. They have an exit with dryers directly facing that. For instance, at sites like our Gallo Car Wash site, we had to put up sound attenuating fence, and we had to do two $20,000 sound studies with a NASA engineer to prove we meet residential zoning codes of 66 decibels at 800 feet during the day. There's no documents on them doing any sound studies, so I don't know how they meet those codes. You have to do extensive reclamation takes, which would probably make them tear up their entire parking lot. Because when you move from an in-bay to an express car wash, you go from being able to process 8 to 16 cars an hour to 100 plus. Even in that small of a footprint, it's all determined by chain speed. You can run your chain speed at whatever you want, 50 cars an hour, 100, 150. The only difference is as you go up, the cars get less clean, but that doesn't prevent them from doing that. The current water systems, I don't believe would meet the, be able to handle it. If you go stand in their bay right now, there's just one storm drain in the center. We would never build a facility with that type of system. It's kind of concern because if you go to Ring Park, I believe it's called, it shows, I believe that's part of the Hogtown Creek. It shows the pond actually is one of the tributaries of it. And so this could create a situation where car wash runoffs flowing into Hogtown Creek directly, it is literally 5 feet from the water system, and it would then pollute the whole way down. It's right at the top. So we sent a first email to the mayor and the commissioners, and we sent an email to the building department, Mr. Freeman, Mr. Edelton. They made them get a permit, but the permit doesn't show any equipment because they're trying to not invalidate their current special use permit, which just shows an in-bay automatic, not an express tunnel. And when it comes to, like, this would be an existential threat to all current express car washes. They're offering $5 a month memberships in the town. Just the utility costs of electric and water is more than that. And they're calling everybody who has a fleet account with us saying, we'll do it $5 a month. So I'm assuming they're using gas monies to subsidize a money-losing venture with the car wash, and it would probably bankrupt Mod Wash, Whistle, the 2 Whistles in town, the Caliber, the Take 5, which got acquired by Whistle, both Gallows. And it's because I'm fine with competition, but it's not clear to me why a multi-billion-dollar oil company does not have to meet the same sound standards, same building standards, same water, like reclamation standards and equipment standards as everybody else in town.
If I might interject, I believe the person you might want to speak to is sitting right here. You mentioned you sent an email to Mr. Edelton. Mr. Edelton at the city staff, I think, would be one of the best people to speak
Yes.
to.
So we
perhaps-
looked through the building plans provided,
Right, but I was
and
going to say
it shows
perhaps you
no
could-
equipment because they're trying to say they're just modernizing a bay and not
Right.
converting to an express car wash. Because the second they moved to an express car wash tunnel, you denied our permit in 2020 for facing 441 about a half mile away. And we had to build the building onto the frontage of 441 with both entrance and exit point away. There is no way for them to make the entrance not point at 6th Street and the exit point at 441
Right.
without demolishing the building. And
So it's
their permit was issued in 2021 after our ruling of denial, and we modernized. And back then we were told it's okay for them because they're an in-bay automatic. The use is low, about 8 cars to 16 cars an hour. Now they're becoming a use that the water demands, electrical demands, all vastly different.
Right.
They aren't really disclosing that. All existing permits just show converting 8 parking spots, making them, it looks like, wider to have 4 vacuum spaces.
So sorry to interrupt, but I think we tend to rule on these things as they come to us. As an applicant comes to us, we'll look at a situation whether we decide to approve it or recommend it to the city commission for approval. For something that you're describing, which sounds like you're describing an enforcement issue, a violation that's going on. Again, I think perhaps connecting with city staff who's seated here at the end would be the best way of going about it.
Okay.
And maybe connecting with them, either at some point during this meeting or after this meeting. We on the plan board, unfortunately, don't have any power right now to help.
What is the power of, since you issued a special use permit for one layout back in 2021?
We're
and now
not
it's
in,
being
we're not
changed?
enforcement. I think that's the thing is we can issue permits or we can make recommendations for it, but unfortunately we don't have enforcement. I don't know that you want us to have enforcement power,
Right.
frankly, but we don't have that. We don't have enforcement power. So that would be something that I think, and Mr. Edelton, maybe you can chime in and
So if I was
point
issued
us to
a
where
car
we
wash,
should be.
Mr. Edelton's the director of the planning department. Let him talk for a minute.
yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have spoken, I believe you and I spoke on the phone, and representatives from the Gallows have spoken to directors and leadership across departments over the past few days over this issue. And we do, so first I do actually want to say thank you and appreciate that the Gallows did point out that there was work going on this site that was not permitted. And because they pointed that out, we did intercede and we approached them and made sure that we got the appropriate permitting and process in place. That being said, we have continued to talk about that there has been approvals in place for both, of course, the Gallows properties and businesses, and approvals and reviews in place for the Circle K. And both of those got staff reviews, administrative internal reviews where staff recommended approvals, and then also, of course, went before this board for special use permits in both cases, and those were approved. And so at that point, a lot of the arguments that you have just heard have been reviewed, have been approved, and of course, the city can present those. And also, to your point, Mr. Chair, if there's a disagreement with that, it is an enforcement approach, and that is also in sustainable development's purview and under code enforcement in my shop. And so we are pursuing that. We are looking at a appropriate response to a lot of these concerns that have been brought up. We have not responded in a coordinated way at this point, but I expect that to happen by the end of the week.
Okay.
So,
And I,
Sorry, so,
Yeah.
so what to add here, like whenever I have to work with city staff on enforcement issues or county staff more often, he just said by the end of the week. Did you mean this week or next week? This week. So what I would recommend, the way I would do it if I were in your position, and I tend to have pretty decent success here, is on Monday around noon, I'd send an email to Mr. Edelton and ask him for a status update. But these things do take time. So you did the right thing reaching out to the city commission and to planning staff. And I think the next step, if I were in your shoes, would just be to send a request for a status update on Monday around noon.
okay.
Does that sound fair?
yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Murrow. Thank you so much for your comment.
Yes, thank you.
If there are any other members of the public that want to speak on an item that is not on the agenda, this is your time. And seeing none, I will turn to Mr. Chan to read the first item of the agenda into the record.
Mr. Chair, one moment.
Yeah.
I regret that I forgot to add something to the agenda when we were doing it. I would like to do a brief request on an old business that we did last month, and that specifically is that I would like to ask that some member of the majority in the petition for the climbing gym adjacent to Depot Park be reconsidered. The procedure is that some member of the majority, which would be Mr. Hill, you, and I think Mr. Murmer, make a motion to reconsider. And I would like to reconsider because you just have to decide if you want to do this. I do believe that there's probably a better zoning classification than industrial. I suspect it's going to be something like B3, business recreation, that would allow the petitioner to have all of the uses that he wanted without the negative consequences of having that piece of property zoned industrial. And the main issue that I'm concerned about, obviously, in uncertain economic times, if this project falls through, whoever ends up with that property has by right all the things that are available under industrial, which I would remind you includes waste transfer station, things like that, all adjacent to the premier recreation area in the city. So basically under the plan board rules, which are also Robert's rules, you can do a reconsideration if it's done the very next meeting, and that's this one, and it has to be the motion has to be made by a member of the majority. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Murmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On this topic, quick question. Mr. Elton, has the City Commission, since our meeting last month, have they indicated what their pleasure would be in terms of what sort of transect they want to see in that area of downtown? Have they taken a vote on that?
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Murmer, not a vote, but there has been feedback and direction given to staff to pursue, and both from this board and from the commission, to pursue looking at rezoning for that entire area. And we are moving forward as staff at looking at how we do that. Right now, we're exploring looking at reaching out to a third-party consultant to help us with a lot of the lift for looking at rezoning for the Depot Park and South Main area, but also Southwest Gainesville at the same time. So we are looking at doing rezoning for that area at both this board and the commission's direction.
And do we, right now, the property is, the city has entered into some agreement of, regarding the property that's in effect for 10 years, is that correct?
I would have to look at the details of that. I do not remember that off the top of my head.
I believe it was 10 years. So a lot of people have talked about this since last month's meeting, and I think it's good to hear that we're looking at rezoning that entire area, and I think it's more appropriate to look at this when it comes back all at once. I mean, I don't know if we want to get involved in saying, like, you know, it's right across from Depot Park, so let's do this one parcel at a time. Staff's already moving on this.
It's a little tricky because I feel like when we made a decision, when we took the vote on this, we're almost better informed then than we are now, just because we had the presentation here. The backup was fresh in our head. We had, I think, a pretty robust discussion on this board, and some robust questioning of both the business owner and city staff. And then the board came to an agreement, and I understand it was more of a split on the board than I think we've had on some other issues, but that's not unusual. I'm a little reluctant to reopen it just because I think we're going to be approaching that issue with a little less knowledge this go around than last time, which
And I would agree, but I would also add to that that it seems like Mr. Edelton and staff are already on top of it. They're, you know, looking into hiring a third-party consultant and coming back to us with a plan, which is at least something I asked for during that debate.
Right.
Like, I didn't want to just rezone one parcel.
right. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us don't love doing just one parcel at a time. Doing something more comprehensive, it's definitely much more effective.
So I think we should just wait until staff comes back with what they're working on, the vision for the entire area.
Mr. Ackerman.
Mr. Chair, my concern, I would be happy to have a comprehensive rezoning, but we have a project which I happen to like. This would allow it to go forward with all of the things they want to do without having, because by the time we get a consultant and do all of this stuff, this will go before the City Commission on July 17th, I think. And so we're going to end up with a piece of industrial zoning right against, because this is all currently zone PS. And I think that's a really negative thing. I don't want to do anything that damages the project. I don't think this will do that, but I think it will protect the city and Depot Park if, in fact, something goes wrong with this project, which, given the history of all of that former city property, we've had numerous proposals which have fallen through.
Right.
And so I don't want to end up with somebody having industrial zoning by right when we could prevent that.
Understood. I believe, I don't know if you guys recall, but Dr. Murmer, you were asking about this. I believe the provision in that deal with the city is 10 years, and if it falls apart at some point in the 10 years, if that business doesn't exist anymore, then the city gets ownership of that land back, right?
Yeah. So I believe, I have enough faith in staff to believe that they can come forward with something within 10 years.
Yeah, that would be sort of, it'd be one thing I would say that was kind of what alleviated my concern when we had this. I shared a lot of those concerns too about having industrial zone land next to Depot Park. It's not a great idea, but I did think that provision of reverting the land back to the city adds a layer of protection there against just a private owner coming in and by right putting up, like you said, maybe a waste disposal facility or something like that.
I'm just talking about some of the worst uses that are allowed under industrial.
No,
There's
absolutely.
lots of stuff we would not want to have adjacent to Depot Park in an industrial classification.
Right, it's a classification that was more appropriate pre-Depot Park, I think, maybe in that area, but it's certainly not.
Well, and in fact, what we're doing is we're rezoning a single parcel right
Right.
as industrial. It's currently all PS. It just seems like if we're going to rezone a single parcel, why don't we do it in something that's a little bit
What was the, can you remind me again the zoning category you were suggesting for that?
B3, I think. I'm sure Mr. Edelton will tell me.
I think, well, the point is that staff is currently looking at what would be appropriate for not just that parcel, but the whole area.
I'm fine with the whole area, but this is coming up in a month.
Right.
The whole rezoning is going to be some time in the distant future.
But then there's a 10-year timeframe where the land reverts back if the deal falls apart.
Mr. Nay, I see you wanting to speak.
You know, I know we had that, we said we had a robust discussion. Last time I felt the motion was kind of rushed for me. Like, I had some more things I wanted to say, and the motion was already out there, and then it was voted on. And I was like, wait a second. You know, Stephanie had made good points. Like, industrial doesn't require, I mean, they can build something there now, and they don't have to build sidewalks or connections because we're letting it be that category.
Right.
Now, if you let it be that category, they can go ahead and do that. Now, they can promise whatever they want to promise, but by right, they don't have to do any of that. And I think that's why Mr. Ackerman's bringing that up, Chair. And to me, I would prefer the zoning be more flexible. When the Knott folks came in front of the commission to get that property, they said they were going to build some housing on it, which, you know, I think housing next to our best park is a good thing too. I would love to see in that. Being industrial, you're not going to be able to do any of that. We can talk about consultants and all that stuff. We know that's going to take a long time. I would like, you know, a U8, U0, you know me, right? A DT. Let me, you know, like anything that would allow some more flexibility in that zoning space. It's also right near Rosa Parks. Like, you can walk to the, although transit's on its life, you know, it's not doing so well in Gainesville right now, but it is the transit hub of Gainesville. So I don't know. It just feels weird to leave it. Well, everything around's it industrial, so we might as well do this one industrial too. I didn't like the vote last time, and I imagine we're not going to get it tonight. But I just wanted to make my point. Thank you.
Mr. Hubbard, you're like the only one that hasn't weighed in on this. We'll put you on the spot. But
No, so it goes before this city commission, correct? City commission, at that point, I mean, we're a recommendation body in this analysis, so they could recommend a different zoning district, and therefore, at the will of the applicant, hopefully, seek a different zoning district. So I'm not inclined to particularly revisit it, you know.
It does look better if the plan board recommends something to them.
they don't always take our
They
recommendations.
don't always take our recommendation, but if we say this is what we support, then that is something for them to go on.
Ultimately, the only way this happens is if a member of the majority, which is the three of you guys,
Right.
That doesn't sound like we have.
raise the issue.
I mean, I would rather have like a chair's letter sent on behalf of the plan board, laying out the fact that the reason why we recommended industrial was because we had no idea what the city commission wanted for that whole area, right? You can make all the faces you want at me, Bob. I can make faces too.
What, Mr. Edelson, Mr. Chan,
I can
if
assure
we
you
open
they
this
don't
back
want
up,
industrial.
if we open this back up and we vote on it again tonight, has that in any way delayed the process from the Knott's end of, you know, building a gym on that site? I know that's something they've worked hard on. I remember the owner saying that was the perfect spot, the perfect facility. And so if we were to reopen that today will that have any impact on their timeline? Will that delay city commission taking up the matter?
So a couple of things. As you all pointed out, it's advisory. So you've rendered your advisory opinion, and that is, in front of the commission right now, such as it is. If you all would like to render a different advisory opinion, then that is certainly within your purview. You're able to do that. No, I do not think at this point that that would slow things down, unless that there is the commission's will, or there is some other mechanism that the commission would act on to slow things down.
Right.
And I don't think that at this point would happen. Now, maybe I don't normally try to make compromise in this way, and I probably should do it more often. But if I could suggest that you all, now having the knowledge that the city commission is moving forward with a rezoning for this area, perhaps you could make a recommendation or an advisory opinion that should the commission move forward with this, that they also consider what you all are discussing here, is that industrial is not appropriate for this whole area. And that as associated with that your advisory opinion is that while this is moving forward, perhaps, or we suggest, or we advise, that please continue to move forward with what you are working on in a full reevaluation of this area.
Do we know, I guess one other question is, do we know, with the terms of the deal with the knot and the city, in terms of what that owner is allowed to put on that site, do we know that it is tied specifically to putting a climbing gym facility, and I believe you wanted to have a little bit of outdoor recreation as well? Do we know that the city has some sort of guarantee on their end that the use has to be what he has stated it is going to be, rather than, a late turn to perhaps some of the other by right uses that are allowed in industrial zoning?
Thank you. So that is an important other part to bring up for this. Of course, it is the city and the city commission that is ultimately in control of this property and what happens in this area. The agreement at this point is the main driver, even more so than the zoning and the land use. So if there are changes to that agreement, then it would go, city commission, and whatever that looks like, a change to the agreement would have to go back through a review process.
So if they change the agreement at all, I'm assuming then the agreement is for a climbing gym and outdoor recreational, right? Indoor, outdoor recreational, just to say more generically. And if there's a change to the use of that changes the nature of the agreement, and then that would, I assume, eventually work its way back to us if it's going back through the review process. Is that accurate?
I am not 100% confident that it would come back through the plan board, but a change to the agreement would go back through the city commission and the ultimate deciders who are party of that agreement.
Okay. Would it go back to city staff at all for review? Would you guys have
It
eyes on
would,
that?
if there were changes to the agreement, it goes back through staff to evaluate and then present to the commission and the manager and the different charter officers to make that decision.
Okay. Dr. Murmur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if that happens, would that not delay the project as it currently stands? If it had to go back through staff?
If there was a change to an agreement, as it stands, I would assume that yes, that would slow things down.
Yeah. What Mr. Edelton had suggested as a potential compromise where the project can proceed as is, but then we can also ask the city commission to direct us or city staff to look at rezoning the whole area, adding an additional, layer of support behind that. That's sort of what I had in mind last month, right? Like, let this project through and let's start the process of looking at rezoning for this, all the areas surrounding Depot Park.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's a great idea. I would move that if there was any interest.
I'm inclined to agree with that approach. speaking back to what Member Nay brought up about, wanting it to be maybe more of a transect zone area. Personally, I agree. I would love to see it be DT. I'm probably a stronger proponent of DT zoning than most people in the city of Gainesville. I think, to Mr. Ackerman's point, could we rezone this as something that's not industrial? Yeah, I think I'd want to get rid of that zoning that or revisit that zoning. If we ended up doing BA or BI or BT, whatever we ended up putting in there that wasn't industrial, I think we'd still want to revisit that because I don't think that's the zoning we want in that area anyway, long term. So I am inclined to agree with Mr. Edelton's approach, echoed by Dr. Murmur, of allowing this project to proceed. It does seem like there are enough protections around this particular deal that I think some of the worst fears around industrial uses will not come to pass. I think, and then I think taking an approach of comprehensively looking at the whole area and making it something that's that makes sense for the area, frankly, and makes sense for the area in 2025, not what it made sense for the area when it was originally zoned. That's the approach I'd be inclined to follow. But Mr. Nay, I defer to you on.
I just wanted to reiterate, it's not just the uses, it's the connections that they're required to make based on, what it's zoned as. Industrial, they don't have to make those connections. They can promise them, they don't have to build them.
It is, this piece of property is right along basically one of the best walking paths that we have already.
I know.
It's not quite, I think.
But they could not connect to it if they don't want to.
That's true, but in this case, I'm not typically a market supply and demand guy because I see a lot of market imperfections. But in this case, when you're right by Depot Park and you want people to come to you and recreate on your space, I think there are strong market pressures for them to.
But they want those folks to stay at their space.
Yeah, but
and do the climbing and do the other stuff. They maybe don't want them to go off site. They're going to have a food truck park there. Do they want them to walk over to Depot and go to the box car? Maybe not. I'm just saying, that's fine. Well, we can move on because it doesn't seem like we have the votes. So
I get the sense that even if we reopened it, it would just be a 3-2 vote at this point. So, and in the process of discussing reopening it, I feel like we've reopened the debate about it again. I could reopen it and we can formalize it.
Yeah, but we don't have the votes anyway. So why would we reopen it if you guys are set in your positions? That's pointless.
I mean, I would also like to note that the applicant is not here to talk about this decision.
Yeah.
I mean, he showed up on his day, right?
Right.
We asked him to show up. He showed up. He presented his case. We accepted it, or as a board, even though it wasn't unanimous, recommended approval. And now when he's not here, we're going back on that.
We're not taking anything from him.
We're not.
Other than the right to put waste.
He came in front of the body. He was able to present his application. He's not able to discuss this with us. And I'd be interested in discussing it with him if he wanted to come back. But that's not what's happening.
But again, like Bob said, we're not taking anything from him. He can still do what he wants to do.
And this is just a recommendation to the city commission for approval.
Of course, we end up looking like idiots.
Well, that's not the first time.
No, it won't be the last.
I've looked like an idiot up here plenty of times.
Okay, all right. Go ahead, just move on.
I appreciate you bringing it up. I think, again, for a lot of reasons, we probably should just move forward. Mr. Chan, if you would read the first item of the agenda to the record, please.
Yes, 2025-513 Mobility Program Comprehensive Plan Amendment. This is LD 25-000059 Comprehensive Plan Amendment to establish the mobility program. And I believe that this is a joint or a combined presentation with the next item, so I'll read that if you'll let me as well.
Yes,
That's 2025-514 Mobility Program Text Amendment. LD 25-000058. That is a Land Development Code text amendment to establish the mobility program.
Okay. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Sure, yeah. Good evening, Chair, members of the board. Scott Wright here from the city's Transportation Department. And these are our items, which is why I'm up here. I know you got hit with a couple of big documents and multiple amendments to the comp plan and the land development code, and our consultant is going to give a presentation here tonight, but I thought it might be helpful if I gave kind of an overview of what we're trying to accomplish here. So basically the main purpose of this is to update and reconfigure our existing transportation mobility program, and otherwise known as TMPA. And that's how we currently account for impacts from development on our transportation system. So we generally collect funds from developers when they build, a shopping center or anything else. That would be replaced by a new mobility program under this proposal that's comprised primarily of a mobility plan and a mobility fee. There's some differences from the current system, and again, that'll be covered in our main presentation in a few minutes. I won't go through those now, but basically the mobility plan is different in the sense that it's a complete transportation plan that we really haven't had in the city, at least since I've been here. So we're taking all of our separate sort of transportation ideas and plans and putting them into one document, and that forms the basis for that mobility fee, which is kind of the second part of that, and that's where we're basing that fee on the location of the development as well as the type of development and other factors that are come into play. So that's why we're here. But in order to implement this plan and fee system, we do need to make some amendments to both the comp plan and the land development code. And in particular, in the comp plan, we're proposing to revise 3 different elements. The transportation mobility element has the most significant changes, as you might expect. Primarily the complete replacement of Objective 10, which is the end part of that element, covers all the TMPA system, sets out all the zones. It's probably unnecessarily complicated, in my opinion. It has a lot of details about what you can and can't do in terms of projects in each zone, and has a point system and a bunch of other things. We're talking about moving those details out of there and into the mobility plan, and then just having kind of like some overarching policies that refer to the mobility plan and the mobility fee. Future land use element is really just one policy that's being revised there, and that's basically a description of the TMPA program. We're replacing that with a description of the new program. And then finally, the capital improvements element. The proposal is to replace, there's a schedule in there or a table, I should say, of transportation projects. Well, really, it's all capital improvement projects. But we're talking about removing those specific projects from the comp plan, and again, referring to that mobility plan document. And then lastly, the land development code amendment, it's all in Article 6. So that's development standards. And we're just updating some transportation concurrency language there, removing references to the TMPA, as you might expect, and then adding a Division 7, which covers how the mobility program would actually work. How the fee would be implemented, where it would apply, where it wouldn't apply, sort of like those logistical details. So again, that's why we're here tonight. And our consultant, New Urban Concepts, Mr. Jonathan Paul, is here and is going to give a more detailed presentation. Staff will be here to answer any questions you might have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. My name is Jonathan Paul. I'm the principal of New Urban Concepts, and tonight we are going to present a mobility plan, a mobility fee, a comprehensive plan amendment, and updates to your land development regulation. It is quite a bit in terms of an overall lift in the transportation system. So I'm going to walk through each one of the steps. Some of the things you specifically will need to make a recommendation on. Others are here more for your information purposes only. Not everything that we're presenting tonight will be transmitted to the state. Some of it is for references, and some of it will be for further action in front of the City Commission. So essentially the comprehensive plan amendment itself is to implement the mobility plan, to incorporate the mobility fee, to transition away from the transportation mobility program area, to plan for mobility for moving people, and to update various amendments to the comprehensive plan. Back when the city originally did this, I want to say, starting in the mid 2000s, the city was one of the leaders in terms of adopting alternatives to transportation concurrency, adopting concurrency exception areas, ultimately developing the current transportation mobility program area, which has been in place largely since 2010, 2011 timeframe. And it's guided the city fairly well. A lot of the policies themselves are actually in the comprehensive plan. So that's actually where you're going to see a significant number of the amendments. While that's worked well in the past, changes in Florida statute are more aligning alternative systems such as a mobility fee, such as what the city has today, with legislation related to impact fees, which has a lot more legal requirements, a lot more specification to it, and a lot more detail that actually has to go into how you calculate the fee, where the fee is assessed, how you spend the money, how long you have to spend the money. So it's something that's really transitioning the city from a process that's worked well and was a forerunner to most other parts of the state to one where the rest of the state sort of caught up now, and legal cases have caught up as well, that requires a lot more detail than what the city's current LDRs and comp plan provides. So one of the amendments is really just a variation on the current goals of the comprehensive plan. It's to implement an alternative transportation system, to encourage compact mixed-use interconnected development, which the city's land use largely already does, to promote a multimodal system, which the city has in place, and then to look at various means to fund transportation improvements, including mobility fees. One of the main objectives is the city shall develop, implement, administer, maintain, and periodically update the citywide mobility plan, mobility fee, collectively known as the Gainesville Mobility Program, to plan, design, fund, and construct mobility projects to enhance the city's multimodal transportation system. The city shall establish the Gainesville Mobility Program as a replacement of the Gainesville Transportation Mobility Program area and traffic mitigation payments through development of an alternative system consisting of a mobility fee paid by new development and redevelopment based on mobility projects needs to accommodate projected growth in travel demand and projects established in the city's mobility plan. It's another one of the policies that basically goes into essentially the mobility plan acting as the capital improvements element for the city. If you actually look at some of the tables in the current capital improvements element, they're referencing 2017, 2018 timeframe. So it's been a while since it's been updated. More and more communities are moving towards using their mobility plans as an active way to guide future transportation decisions and to actually more holistically address how you fund transportation on an annual basis. Part of this will require a land development code. Essentially what we are doing is removing a lot of the high-level detail in the comprehensive plan to more specific detail in the land development regulations itself. And those regulations cover a lot more of the statutory requirements for alternative systems. And part of this is, the legislature has been amending policies related to concurrency, to road impact fees, to impact fees for 20 plus years now. The latest amendment was House Bill 479, formally calls what the city system is today and the system we're proposing as an alternative transportation system, moves beyond concurrency, beyond proportionate share, and road impact fees, all of which the city's current system does, but really it gets more towards the transparency and the detail that goes into these programs. So the city currently does assess fees today. They charge new development for its impact to the transportation system. The fee is based on trip generation performed by an applicant, and it's determined on a case-by-case basis. So they come in and there's a list of projects. How it's specifically developed is really, coordination between the city staff, Public Works Department, Planning Department, but they identify a list of roadway improvements and a list of mobility projects that are needed per area. That list then results in an overall fee that's assessed. But it's sort of more of a planning level process. It's actually not documented in a mobility plan, a capital improvements element. It has worked well. I mean, the city's done an amazing job building its transportation system, the connectivity you see out by Butler Plaza and the interstate. A lot of that's come in from 20 plus years of planning. And I'd say a lot of that has benefited from the continuity of your staff that you've had for a number of years in the city to help see those projects through. A mobility plan sort of starts to help guide that and make some of those projects more relevant, putting them out there on a plan itself for the community to look at and for others, and to also serve as a basis for the fee itself. So mobility plan, I mean, the city's been a leader in moving people. It's one of the highest levels of transit ridership in the state, high levels of bicycling, walking. So this really just continues what the city's been doing in terms of its overall mobility. It's just bringing a lot of the various plans that are out there today together in one place. So this is something that's new. Both Alachua County and the city of Gainesville were sort of at the forefront of this back in the mid-2000s and then formally adopting programs around the 2010 timeframe. Both of those have actually served to guide a number of other communities in terms of how you do an alternative to concurrency. But at the time, there was no regulation. It just said you're allowed to do a concurrency exception area, a multimodal transportation district, an alternative to concurrency. That's it. Back when these programs were even considered, there wasn't even an Impact Fee Act yet in Florida statute, so there was no guidance in that. Well, fast forward 15 plus years now, and there's a lot more development occurring in the state. A lot more portions of the state are urbanizing, and some of the issues that Gainesville and Alachua County ran into very early on of not necessarily wanting to widen roadways or add new roads to accommodate new development. Well, now you have communities in Orlando, Miami, Tampa, all along the east and west coast that are running into the same thing. They either can't widen roads anymore or they don't want to. So they've been looking for alternatives to concurrency. And so really it's the system's geared up, and as more and more communities have done this, there's been more case law, there's been more legal challenges, there's been more definition that's occurred at the statutory level to help give more guidance to communities. Because back when the city put these policies together that are in their plan today, the city was the leader. I mean, the city was the one creating those policies, and there really wasn't a whole lot of guidance at the state level or even other communities to go by. And really that's, testament to the city. And I think even more so, a lot of those policies and procedures that are in your comprehensive plan, they've already been incorporated into your land development code. They've already been incorporated into your engineering manuals. They're just the way the city does its day-to-day review now. So this is really an opportunity to help clean up the comprehensive plan and make it more streamlined. So there have been several outreach efforts that have been undertaken. We've had several stakeholder meetings. This process has been over a year now. There's been workshops, there's been coordination with Vision Zero, and there's been various meetings held with various boards within the city itself. There's actually a mobility plan, and we'll have to correct that document there. There's actually a separate Gainesville mobility plan, and then there's a mobility fee technical report. The mobility plan cover will actually be, and these subsequent plans will be transmitted as part of the comprehensive plan amendment. The tech report guides the actual fee calculation itself, but the mobility plan is comprised of a streets plan, a multimodal plan, intersections, sidewalks, transit, and then various implementation initiatives. for any members of the public that may be watching, or even if you all want to go in there and get a better feel for these projects, all these projects we're talking about that are in the plan, they're all online and they're all part of the city's GIS system. So you can actually click on each one of these various plans, each one of these projects, and you can see a description of the project, the limits, what's actually being proposed, and then you can actually overlay those plans with the existing bike lanes, existing sidewalk network, so you can really start to see how all the pieces come together. Given the size of the city, and given that we're talking about these presentations here, some of these maps are really hard to show at this level. But many of these projects, they've either already in the long range plan, they're being discussed as part of the bicycle master plan, they've been part of the Vision Zero plan. They're not necessarily brand new ideas that we're creating. The city's already established a lot of those. We're just bringing them together in one unified document. So there's actually a QR code that can be scanned that will actually take you to all these projects and all the maps that we're going to show you. And I would recommend looking at those. There will still be some time. It's going to take a month or so to transmit to the state, a month for them to give us feedback. There's still going to be ongoing times over the next 2 or 3 months to give feedback to us on individual projects before we actually go back before the city commission. But they do cover a whole wide range of transportation improvements. The streets plan itself, and again, we're kind of going to the map view that we have in the reports now. But if you go back, let's see here. All right. But every one of these maps that I will be showing, all this data is in a GIS system and it's all available online. So you can click through each one of these plans and each one of these projects to see more detail. But the streets plan does include a number of projects. State statute does require that these mobility plans, if you're not collecting a fee on behalf of the county and the city does not collect the county's mobility fee, you are required to address impact to state roads, to county roads, and to city roads. So you will see several state road projects on here, several county road projects. Doesn't mean the city's responsible for all those, but the city's mobility fee does include a share of the cost of those. Projects would be such as the four laning of 121 north of 441, potential for four laning or improving 53rd from the airport all the way over to Millhopper. Looking with FDOT at the possibility of improvements to State Road 100 by the airport as an alternative to some of the proposals to reduce the travel lanes on University Avenue. And then there are several projects being coordinated with the county as the city continues to annex out to the west around the Finley Woods area to help build portions of the network out there. A large portion of those areas between Williston and Archer Road, there really aren't many local road connections. So we've working with the county has sort of identified a network that should go out there as development comes in. And then within the core part of the street, the city, you're looking at opportunities to reduce travel lane widths, to add on-street bicycle lanes. There was one idea of converting 3rd and 4th as a potential one-way pair all the way from 13th all the way over to 441 to add in a bicycle lane and a potential for sidewalk. Both those areas are really, really narrow today. They accommodate two-way travel, but a lot of them don't have sidewalks or bike lane facilities. So some of these projects are things that could be done in the next 5 years. Some of them are next 15 or 20 years. This is a 20-year plan, so it's looking out towards the 2045 horizon. I will say at some point, all these projects that we have talked about have had some level of discussion already in a various plan, whether it be an FDOT's work program, the county's program, the city's, or the long-range transportation plan. We also have a multimodal plan, which is really focused on opportunities, at least on the state road network and the county road network, to basically reconstruct sidewalks to widen them to an 8-foot wide multi-modal path or a wider sidewalk when it's available, such as along State Road 121, such as along 39th Avenue and Millhopper Roadway. And then also looking really closely at where there are opportunities to connect trails. The city's already gotten a fairly extensive network today that's pretty well connected, and there are several opportunities to make further connections. And some of the projects that are on county roads, they're already identified as part of the county's mobility plan. So we've largely incorporated those into this. There are other projects along state roads that would be coordinated with FDOT when they resurface a roadway or then they look at opportunities there. So when you pull this map in, especially on the GIS layer, where you're actually able to bring in the existing facilities, you really start to see how this map fills in a lot of the gaps of the system to basically provide a complete multimodal system throughout the city wherever you're attempting to go. For bicycle lanes, the network's pretty well already established, so we've looked at really opportunities to add additional bicycle boulevards. Those are the markings with sharrows in the street, maybe some additional signage along those corridors. Most of them are along local roads just to provide connectivity to the overall system. And again, this map kind of looks a little barren in isolation, but when you actually overlay the existing facilities in it, you see how it makes a lot of the key gap connections. And then there are a couple of opportunities for actually new bicycle lanes, and a potential for along portions of southwest and southeast second to actually look at a protected bicycle lane along that corridor. We've identified a number of intersection improvements throughout the city. These could be anything from a roundabout to a traffic signal, to actually retrofitting existing roundabouts that don't have bicycle ramps today. It's a pretty standard design if you go along South Main Street where you're riding your bicycle on the street, and then there's an off-ramp to get onto the wider sidewalk, and then a off-ramp to get back on the street once you go through the roundabout. Well, if you drive that same thing along Depot Avenue, those don't actually exist. So if you're a bicyclist in the street, you either take the roundabout or you got to hop the curb itself. So we've looked at some opportunities to add those ramps to those roundabouts as part of retrofitting the system. We've looked at pedestrian signals, mid-block crossings. So there's a lot of detail out there, and this has been coordinated closely with the city's planning department, with county public works, and some of the projects on FDOT corridors as well. There are a number of sidewalks that are proposed. The vast majority of the collector and arterial roads in the city already have sidewalks, so the major road network itself is pretty well taken care of. If you live on any local residential street or in older parts of Gainesville neighborhoods, sidewalks just weren't built in most parts of the city, probably up until the 2010s or after. And so a lot of the Sugarfoot, a lot of the neighborhoods on 43rd Street and the East Side, Spring Hill, they didn't have sidewalks on them. So the city has a sidewalk master plan that we've looked to add along those corridors, either providing access to schools, to parks, places of worship, or citizens have already requested those today. So we've incorporated those from the city already to help fill in a lot of these gaps. And these are, city's still got a long way to go in terms of sidewalk along all its local roadways, but these are sort of some of the key corridors that our sidewalks are needed along. And so that really, all those projects together combine to be the mobility plan. And the intent is each year as the city commission looks at its budget, Public Works looks at what projects are available in terms of funding, they'll pull from this mobility plan, which has well over 400 projects, and they'll help to start prioritizing those on an annual basis. As new development comes in, there'll be some opportunities to work with them to help advance these projects, to build these either along their site or either beyond their site, and then offer a mobility fee credit for some of the off-site types of improvements. That's actually one way that the county's advanced a lot of its projects, is they've worked with developments and kind of entered into various agreements. In some instances, they built it both on their site and then they've extended it beyond that. So it gets built much quicker than if you had to wait in terms of it being designed and funded at a city level. So the mobility plan really, I helped Alachua County develop theirs back in 2010, and we just recently did an update. And it's been a really good tool to help guide development, to help guide infrastructure, to help guide ask for state and federal funding. A lot of the communities that we've worked in is something they bring into their reports. And when they're meeting with new developments, when they're talking with FDOT, when they're meeting with utility companies, they actually have a plan where all the projects are together. And then having it, of course, available on GIS and online helps it even easier to make that detail. But it's something a lot of our community partners have found to be a very useful tool to them. So the mobility fee, this is not something that is transmitted to the state. The policies basically say the city's making all these changes to implement and adopt a mobility fee. The state itself doesn't get involved in what the fee is, where it's at, or how it's necessarily calculated, but they want to know, they've established the criteria in statute for how you give notice, for how you update it, for a lot of the procedural type things. So the mobility plan list of projects will be transmitted with the comprehensive plan amendment. The mobility fee is something that you'll be looking at in terms of land development regulations. And because it is an LDR, you will be making a recommendation to the city commission to consider amendments to the LDR to basically implement the mobility fee program. And it is replacing what the city already has in terms of its transportation mobility program. It continues to be a one-time fee paid by new development. It's not something that's ongoing. It's not an assessment. It's not a tax on existing residents or businesses. It's just for new development to mitigate its impact. And it is a funding source for the projects. And the actual fee itself is calculated based on all those projects that you saw in the mobility plan. There we go. There are a number of overall steps to developing and adopting a mobility plan. We're covering basically steps 1 through 4, modifying the comprehensive plan, developing a mobility plan, developing the mobility fee, and also preparing the implementing ordinance. And then the further steps will really be ones that the city will take to initiate these on a day-to-day basis. So there is, there's a separate document and there's a mobility plan that details all the projects that we talked about, includes all the maps, includes a list of the projects. Then there's actually a separate report for the mobility fee calculation itself. And this is largely done because there are a lot of legal and statutory requirements in terms of how you calculate a fee. The city has basically been able to implement this type of system over the last 10 plus years because when it was adopted, these type of systems didn't really exist and there were no requirements to detail how you actually calculate the fees. Now, when you're doing this, basically a mobility fee, an impact fee, whatever you want to call it, it's an exaction. It's taking money from a developer to mitigate their impact. Well, the courts increasingly are saying how you take that money and then that money amount that you determine, you have to document it. You have to have a nexus between the impact of the development and how much you're collecting. And then you've also got to be able to demonstrate how are you spending that money. So a lot of this detail in here is really because the court system is catching up to this and saying, if you're going to do this and if you're going to take money, for a long time, money wasn't necessarily considered the same thing as land. So if you required land from a developer, that was either a takings. Well, they're starting to basically say, any type of fee or exaction, in essence, could be a taking if there's not documentation to it, there's not a public benefit, and there's not a rational nexus between how much you collect and what the fee is itself. So we actually go through and document this in pretty extensive detail. There's a lot of calculations. Again, the city probably does some level of all this today, but there's not actually a documentation of all those steps that go through it. And there's nothing wrong with that up until the new requirements of statute. The statute saying if you're going to continue to do these things, you're going to have to document how you do it. So whether the city did a mobility plan, mobility fee, or kept its own system, it would have to become much more transparent in terms of all the detail that went into those calculations. And then this all results in what's essentially a mobility fee schedule. So right now, as an applicant comes in, they don't know what they owe until they submit a trip generation study. Here, they'll actually be able to look upfront before they ever even talk to anybody in the city, and they'll know right away what their mitigation is for their offsite impact. They still have requirements to build sidewalks on the site, still have requirements to put transit facilities in, possibly some bicycle lanes or turn lanes. But in terms of their mitigation that they have to pay, they'll be able to calculate it up front. And they'll be able to look at their pro forma and say, does this work, doesn't this work from the get-go? This has actually been the process the county has had in place for 15 plus years. They've had a similar system to this, so you can go to their website, calculate the fee, know what your mitigation is up front. Now any development coming in the city will be able to do the same thing. There are a few policy level decisions that are going to have to go in front of the city commission. And this is part of how the current system is structured today. The current system does not charge a TMPA fee for any development in the eastern portion of Gainesville or around UF or within the downtown area today. So they have requirements that they have to meet in terms of sidewalks, bicycle lanes, parkings, and things like that, but they are actually not required to pay a fee to mitigate their impact. So all the development that you've seen over the last 10 plus years in and around the campus, in and around downtown, they have not had to pay the TMPA. All the stuff out in Butler Plaza, all the stuff that's going out to the western portion or the northwest portion of the city, they have been paying a TMPA fee. So this would be a pretty big decision from the city commission. And in the workshops we've had a lot of questions asked, and it will be something that is going to be a discussion item going forward, is do you now want to assess a fee in the east side, in the downtown? What we'll say is, there are a lot of needs. We've identified a lot of needed projects that are out there, whether they be sidewalks, bicycle lanes, transit improvements, intersections, and their needs throughout the whole city. So in terms of the need, it's there. Ultimately, in terms of the fee and the implementation, that's going to be a policy level decision from the city commission. There is a separate transit fee that's charged to multimodal development or multifamily development around the University of Florida. We've actually incorporated transit into the overall mobility plan now, working with RTS and referencing their transit development plan. So the mobility fee will essentially be part of funding roads, transit, in terms of new capital improvements, bicycle, pedestrian facilities, and it would replace the transit fee that's only for multifamily today, but transit's being incorporated into the overall plan. There's not presently an exemption for affordable housing or workforce housing under the TMPA program today. So that's something that is being integrated into this. So the city could actually offer either a lower fee or that by statute they could waive the fee for affordable housing or attainable housing. And then we are still looking at having a de minimis threshold. The TMPA today does not apply to any trips or any development of 10 daily trips or less. So if you're building a single family home, you're building a very small office type of a use, you would not pay something today. The way this fee is structured, they could either continue to be exempt or they could be assessed, any new development could be assessed a fee. So if you go to, if you're in unincorporated Alachua, you're up in City of Alachua, your City of High Springs, your City of Newberry, they all charge a fee for single-family homes. The periphery cities, they all charge road impact fees. Alachua County charges a mobility fee. They charge it for any new development, single-family, change of use, anything that generates additional trips pays a fee. The city would be able to establish a de minimis threshold. It would just need to apply throughout the overall city if it wanted to continue to do that as part of this process. So currently today, if you're building a accessory dwelling unit, if you're building a single family home and it doesn't require you to submit a development plan, they don't pay a fee today within the city. The overall plan itself is broken into 4 different assessment areas. Right now, there are 6 different areas. The southwest and the northwest are fairly similar. The central area, which includes UF and downtown, is expanded, and right now that's considered Zone A. And then there's a Zone B, which is the east side, that doesn't pay the fee. So what we're proposing is to help simplify the overall process. Right now, there's varying levels of standards in the comprehensive plan. So if you're in A, you got to do this plus this plus this. If you're in B, you got to do all these other factors. The comprehensive plan amendment says they all have to do this base set of improvements: sidewalks, survey of right-of-way, accessibility to transit. Everybody's got to do that throughout the city. And then you've got to pay a fee. And then that fee is based on the area. So there's not as many road projects in the east side of town as there are in the northwest or the southwest. So their fee is lower overall than those other areas of the city. The central part is sort of the middle level between those. And then we've identified areas that, one thing that's happened over the years is the city's added a couple of acronyms or a couple of letters to its TMPA and added some policies onto it for annexation areas. Now we've kind of addressed that and identified if an area annexes, this is the zone it would go into. So you'd automatically know if you're annexing that area, you know what your mitigation is, you know what your requirements are. And then some of the other details as it relates to various types of improvements or studies that you have to do in terms of site access, that's all now gone from the comp plan, and it's already been incorporated into the city's engineering standards today. So yeah, it's been pretty common practice now for 5+ years in the city, so that's not going to change as this part. But really the biggest difference will be, one, knowing what the mitigation is up front, and then from a policy level decision, is this going to be implemented citywide, or are there still areas of the city that may be exempt from the overall system? And then there's also a requirement, right now, the TMPA, each one of the areas, the funds that are collected in that area largely have to be spent within that area. We're continuing that same concept here, is that if you're collecting money downtown, you've got to largely spend it downtown. The northwest, spend it in the northwest, the southwest, the east. We've added a couple of provisions in there. So if the city can make a finding that says, this project crosses 2 boundaries, or this transit is going to provide access to these areas, or this trail connects these districts, under that instance, you could pull funds from multiple districts, but you actually have to document it. And it's got to be reviewed by the city attorney before then it goes to the city manager for a sign off. So there's a lot of levels of transparency that have been built into the overall process. And this is a legal requirement. This is both a statutory requirement and a case law requirement that says when you're collecting money from somebody, you've got to spend it to provide them a benefit to that. You can't just provide a benefit to the overall public or spend it wherever you want. You've got to actually provide something to the people that are paying the fee. So these values that we're going to be showing you, these will not be transmitted to the state. The technical report's not transmitted to the state. The only thing in the comprehensive plan, it says the city is going to do an alternative system. That system's going to be a mobility fee and a mobility plan. The city doesn't weigh, the state does not weigh in terms of what these overall amounts should be. But all these numbers are documented in the technical report. And as you can see from the east side, the central, the northwest, the southwest, what we found through our modeling and looking at our data, both the overall trip lengths are somewhat shorter in the east side and central because the areas are more compact. And then the overall need for projects or the types of projects aren't as auto-centric as you get out to sort of the peripheries of the city. So the lowest fee is within the East Mobility fee area, gets higher and then around downtown in the UF, then the Northwest, and then the Southwest, which is sort of the Butler Plaza, Williston Road area. So we are calculating for single family. So if you're coming in for a subdivision, PUD, or for a master plan development, you'd be looking at paying these fees for those dwellings units. If the city elects to assess mobility fees on single family and doesn't have a de minimis threshold, these would also apply to accessory dwelling units or new development that comes in for the city to build a new home, to expand their home, whatnot. So that's a policy level decision that's still going to be made, and that's something that you can weigh in terms of a recommendation to the city commission as well. You're not charging it today. The fee is structured to charge it if the city commission so wants to. They could also establish a de minimis threshold that then would apply citywide. So it addresses residential uses, it addresses places of worship, assisted living facilities, daycares, private school. Florida statute does exempt charter schools and public schools from mobility fees and impact fees, so they are not assessed to, but any other type of education facility is. You also have for outdoor recreation, think of a mini golf or a pickleball court or something like that, that actually charges a fee for use. If it's a private development building its own amenity for its residents, it wouldn't pay for those. If it's the city or the county building a facility, they don't pay for those. But if you're building a commercial enterprise where you're charging somebody for that type of activity, then you would pay for it. Likewise for a gym or a studio that has an impact to the system, you'd pay for those as well. There's also a separate fee for industrial uses, which is assembly, manufacturing. Largest probably some of the northern portions of the city up by 121. And then there's also a charge for commercial storage, outdoor boat storage. Again, all these fees, they rely on if it's a commercial enterprise. So if you're a subdivision and you have an area for boat storage for your residents, that area is not paying a fee. But if you're a mini warehouse and you're charging somebody to come put its RV or their boat out there and you charge them to store it on their property, that is something that would fall under a commercial storage category. Likewise, you have office uses and medical offices, both which have varying levels of impact to the transportation system. The medical is about 3 times the trip generation as the office type of use, so their fees tend to be higher. And then for retail establishments, your basic goods and services that you provide out there, the fee varies depending on where you are within the county or within the city. We've done an analysis of these various rates, compared them to commercial developments, and they're relatively similar to what they are today, with the exception that the central area and the east don't pay today. They would pay under this mobility system. And these fees vary based on the type of use. A high impact use is a grocery store, a dispensary, a bank. They all tend to generate a greater number of trips, so they would pay a higher fee per 1,000 square feet. A fast food restaurant Similarly, then you have your overnight accommodations, which are your hotels. One thing that's happening, more and more retail facilities are starting to provide drive-through services. Dry cleaner historically has done it, pharmacies as well, but now Publix is having drive-through pharmacies. Targets, Walmarts, starting to have drive-through or facilities that you place orders on. Seen a few places in rural portions of North Florida that you're starting to have them associated with Dollar General type uses. So there's a general catch-all for a drive-in facility, standalone ATMs that are replacing banks themselves, and then quick service restaurant drive-throughs. So if a Chick-fil-A, a Starbucks, or somebody comes in and they add another drive-through, if any of you have dealt with any of those restaurants, you know they have a pretty big impact. So this is actually helps to capture some of that impact from those types of uses. And then just these are some of the various automotive uses, car washes, vehicle pumps, and vehicle cleaning. So I know that's a lot to go over, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have. The documentation that we did provide to you, one is a comprehensive plan amendment, so that's modifying the policies, the goals, objectives, and policies of the capital improvements element, future land use element, and the multimodal transportation element. That will be transmitted to the state of Florida. That's a requirement as part of this process. The mobility plan report itself will also be transmitted to the state as backup material for these amendments. One of your motions will be to either recommend to the city commission to transmit or to not transmit that. Another one is the actual LDR amendments, the LDC. That places in all the detail and the criteria for actually administering the mobility fee itself. Because that is a land development regulation, that is something that you all would recommend or not recommend to the city commission. That does not have to go to the state. So that's something that is reviewed and approved locally. But because we're kind of doing this together, we brought both of them at the same time. So there will actually be an implementing ordinance that goes along with all this. So some of the key policy decisions that we will be bringing before the city commission, the biggest being the east and the central don't pay a fee today. You'll have to weigh in on whether or not they want to do that into the future. Secondly, should they have a de minimis threshold to exempt certain level of development? Thirdly, should there be a provision for affordable housing or attainable housing? And then fourth would be the incorporating transit into the overall mobility plan. The county's incorporated transit to its overall mobility plan. A lot of the fees that we work on have incorporated transit as well. So this is sort of a natural progression to that, but it is still a policy decision for the city commission to consider. And I know that's a lot to cover. I know you've got a lot of documentation in front of you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. I believe Mr. Nay has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair Sanchez.
Stunned into incoherence.
Oh yeah, I'm totally, so much information in here. One of the things I would like to see is sort of like comparisons of like what the fee would be currently on some of these properties versus these new fees, because I just want to make sure that we're not like making things not possible to be built because we're going to be charging too much. That's what I looked in a bunch of the backup, and I didn't see that in the backup.
I'll defer to city staff. I think they've actually done an analysis of that in preparation for tonight.
Mr. Wright, you're on.
Yeah, we anticipated this question. So that is a very valid question, and if you want, I can show this on the overhead, but I'll first give you kind of a summary of what our analysis has revealed in terms of that. This is not an apples to apples comparison, unfortunately.
Are there other copies of this?
I'm sorry, what?
Are there copies of this?
I do not have any other copies of this. Certainly.
Binoculars?
Yeah, we can zoom in. We got old eyes on the
Yeah, we
board,
can,
unfortunately.
Zoom in
It's not really
here.
picture, but-
No, I share the same kind of issues of being blind.
We have smaller copies. Sure.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
So there are different zones in the new proposal than we have today.
We only have
There
a handful
are
of these, but
places where we
maybe we
don't
can
charge
share
the
this.
fee at all today. And then the uses are grouped differently than we look at them today. So that's why I say this is not an apples to apples comparison, but I tried to take, 15 or so typical types of developments that we see and look at each of the zones under the proposed, and then look at each of the zones under the existing and see where those fell out. I would say overall, the new fees are higher by maybe 10 to 20%, which, I mean, if you think about the cost of everything that's gone up over the last 10 or 15 years, that's maybe not even enough. But we didn't want to increase the fees too dramatically, especially given that we're applying them in some new locations. The other thing that we looked at was the county fees. Just geographically, the county is divided into two zones with two different fees. There's a western zone and an eastern zone. And so we looked at our fees in East Gainesville proposed compared to Eastern Alachua County proposed, and our fees were even there significantly lower. Same on the west side of the county. I would say on average maybe 25% lower fees in the city in the west than in the county in the west. Which, if you think about it, makes sense because you're looking at longer travel distances and more roadway type projects in the county, so you can kind of understand why their fee would be higher than ours. Again, that's very much generalizations that I'm giving you. I understand that, and as we were going through this process, we kept kind of revising this analysis, and I actually just finished this morning, which is why I probably don't have a lot of copies for you. But just in a general sense, I would say that staff is pretty comfortable with what we're seeing in terms of the sort of marginal increase in the fees, and I would say probably the places where those fees increase the most are for the more auto-oriented uses, which probably makes sense if you're thinking about the cost of roadway projects versus the cost of a sidewalk or even a transit service. So.
Great.
Any follow-up questions?
I think there's a lot of them, actually. I see a lot of lights on. Dr. Murmur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is similar to Mr. Nay's. I think, I don't know, I'm not sure this table, and I thank you for providing this. This does give me more information than I had going into this after reading the backup. But it's not, and if I'm understanding Mr. Nay correctly, that's not what he just asked for either. So real life examples of, say,
Yeah, I would like to sort of like the ox, the ox is being built or whatever. What would they be charged today? What would they be charged in the future?
And-
Whatever, some project that's just recently built.
and I would like to see to be more specific and as clear as possible, because I know there's a lot of information. This was a great presentation, and I understand it a lot better than I did when I was just scratching my head and trying to figure out why I was going insane at home reading it. So thank you, but it's still a lot of process, and I want to make sure that we're all comfortable giving advice on this. For each district and for each use, real life examples of what was paid as mobility fee under the current schedule and what would be paid for that same building in each district, each use under the proposed schedule. I'm not sure you can do that tonight.
No.
Okay. So, but
so let me make sure let me throw out some
In
some
each
ideas.
district,
Yeah.
in each district for
Right.
each use, real-life examples of what was paid in mobility fee under the current schedule, and what would be paid had that building been built under the proposed schedule.
Right. My follow-up to that is, I guess, I mean, there's some uses which may not be built in all of the zones, just because of the nature of those zones.
Yeah, so if real-life examples don't exist, with the exception of the east side and central, because we can compare what would have been paid
Right.
to what will be
Yeah.
paid under the current scheme, if the building doesn't exist, yeah,
Yeah.
if there's no real-life examples, there's no real-life examples.
Right.
But we know that there are convenience stores, for example, in all 4 districts. So I would expect if you come back to us, if we don't move on this tonight and we have the opportunity to hear from you again, which is what I hope, we know we can expect to see a convenience store comparison across the
Right.
districts.
And there's multifamily in every
Yeah.
every
I
district.
think the housing would be a real point of interest among, I mean, myself personally, but I'm guessing some other members of the board as well.
Right.
So, I understand that, second question, I understand that we have to set the fee based solely on, or must we set it solely based on trip generation, or does the state statute and case law allow us to base it on something else related to transportation?
So actually, today it is based on just trip generation. Now, the fee itself, the reason why some of these are higher, it looks at trip generation, trip length, pass-by trips, the share of travel on. Now it's accounting for all modes of travel, bicycle, walking, transit. So, there's a lot more detail into the fee. The current TMPA is trip generation times the cost. So, it's also based on an overall mobility plan that includes all modes of travel. The TMPA is largely based on some of the major roadway projects, plus some of the other core projects, but it's not based on an overall mobility plan.
So what is proposed is based on more than just trip generation?
Correct.
What's proposed
What is proposed is based
is
on more
based
than trip
on-
generation.
Okay. And we are, under state statute and case law, allowed to offer incentives such as inclusionary zoning for affordable housing or attainable housing, or to entice commercial or industrial investment where we'd like to see it.
There are various provisions in Florida statute that the legislature's allowed them to do just that, to waive either fees or to lower them for certain types of uses.
Okay. Thank you. And sorry, I have a lot, but I'm just trying to
I
get
mean,
my head
the
around this.
floor is yours. You're allowed to ask questions.
And this is pretty much just for industrial, commercial, and residential. What parts of buildings are included when calculating the fees? So for square footage, does the space have to be under a roof?
Typically, most of the spaces are under roof. If it is a space that includes a large outdoor storage area, that area would fall under this as well in terms of calculations. If it's for your parking or your general circulation, no, doesn't fall under it.
So not
But if it's a principal use of the facility, and you're storing it, say you have a Lowe's that has a garden center in Southside, or, I'm trying to think of a couple of the other ones, the Rural King, it has sort of a whole area that it stocks its outside stuff in terms of agricultural uses, and then its building itself. You'd pay the fee for all the uses, because that's all something that you could go in there and purchase as part of that.
But not the parking lot, you're saying, right?
But not the parking lot, not the stormwater facilities, not the circulation. That's not included in the calculations.
So to be clear, let's say we're talking about commercial, let's say first magnitude, or even a single family home, an uncovered deck, would that be included?
If you're using that as part of your outdoor seating, yes. If it's just an outdoor deck to, access to get into the site, no, you wouldn't. But if it's principally for use where people can congregate and basically expands the capacity of that use, then yes, it would pay.
What about stairways in apartment buildings?
For the multifamily, I believe it's the dwelling unit, but I need to double check on that. It's actually the physical
Yeah, because
space
that's what I
itself.
was thinking, because I'm concerned about
Yeah.
the housing in particular on top of industrial and commercial, and I'm thinking all the dead space, whether it be the stairways in the common areas, gyms, stuff like that.
Yeah, any type of amenity certainly would not pay for it. The only time an amenity would pay for it is if they actually offered it access to the public. So if they said, hey, we have a gym here and you can buy a membership to this, and it's available to anybody to use, it would pay, but if it's only for the residents of that, it would not pay.
Thank you. And then I only have one more like big question. I have three easy ones. So I just want to know if this is for my fellow planning board members. I know you guys are probably getting sick of me, but the transit a transit plan was mentioned. If you go back to the slides in the overview slide of the plans for how to spend this money, the same slide that mentioned streets, sidewalks.
Right, we're largely deferring to the transit development. So there's a separate transit development plan that goes through a whole legal, very detailed process that documents federal requirements, state requirements, and whatnot, and it has a cost associated with it, a capacity associated with it. We're referencing that transit development plan, so we're not pulling in all those projects from that transit development plan.
Okay, so I mean, our bus system is currently in a precarious position because of some issues with the major entity in town. I would like to see how this fee, if we implement it, how that would affect RTS.
Okay.
That's a very important topic for me. All right, how much? So you mentioned that right now, developers, people who want to build, have to perform a trip study
Correct.
and submit it. How much is saved by not having to perform that trip study, and is that included in this?
I've done a number of them myself. For smaller projects, it's probably $3 or $4 grand. For larger projects, it could be anywhere to 25, 30 grand for those studies. They will still have, larger projects will still have to look at their driveways. And part of that is, if they're on a county or state road, they got to look at it regardless to get a right-of-way use permit. But on a city roadway, they'll still have to evaluate their driveways as well. But the component of it to calculate the fee, they wouldn't have to pay for. So they don't necessarily have to go out and study a whole wide range of networks. So for generally, from what I've charged historically in the past for traffic studies, roughly $5 grand for a smaller one and 25 to 30 for a larger project.
So would you say that under the proposal, they building a building in, let's say, southwest or northeast, where we currently have these fees, overall, they'd be more expensive under the current proposal than under the previous? Because in this table, it shows that that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, in general, one where, all these costs are 2025. So they all are reflecting the latest cost. They're including transit, bike, ped, and roadways.
Yeah, I was just wondering if getting rid of the requirement, that's at least for the smaller projects, for having a trip study could generate enough savings to sort of break even with the increased cost. But it sounds like the answer is probably no.
No, yeah, I mean, it's is it a savings? Yes. Is it?
But not enough to break even.
Is it enough to break even? No.
Penultimate question, what triggers the proposed fee in redevelopment? So are you using the substantive rehabilitation standard where if 50% of a building, the answer is yes? Oh.
Yeah, 50% is typically what the threshold is.
And that's what,
Generally, is it generating new trip impact? So if you're just rehabilitating a building, even to 100%, and it's a commercial use and it's going to be a commercial use, you wouldn't pay anything. It's really, are you a change of use? Are you generating more traffic to the overall transportation system? And generally, there are some provisions in the ordinance that generally trying to promote changes of use. And so really it'd only be if you're going to a much higher trip generating use, you potentially pay that fee. But I think we have some provisions in there that the changes of use, actually, we're not going to consider those in terms of in terms of the fee. So if you wanted to rehab an old industrial use and put a restaurant in it, you wouldn't necessarily have to pay the difference for that because the structure already exists.
Thank you. And then my other question is, only slightly off topic for city staff. Forrest might be able to help, or Mr. Elton might be able to help me out here. So during the presentation, it was mentioned that money raised or revenue generated in a district has to be spent in that district. Why don't we do that for tree mitigation revenue? Is that because it's collected universally citywide?
The tree mitigation program and funds are exactly that, a separate program and funds that are governed by a different ordinance.
Different state statute as well? Okay. So it's just something that stood out to me. So that's all my questions. Ultimately though, I think this is really good. I've learned a lot more. I feel more comfortable than I did coming in here tonight. But if this is difficult for us to understand, and when it comes to city stuff, we just focus on comprehensive plan stuff, future land use and zoning. I can imagine the city commission, which has to think about a whole bunch of different issues, could really use our advice on this. So I don't want to move too fast. And I'm obviously gonna not skip anybody, and I'm not gonna make a motion right now, but I think that we should consider continuing this meeting and ask staff to come back with some more information, including answering that question that member Nay and I had, real life examples of buildings in each districts under the current and proposed schemes.
If I could add before you get into just a train of thought, the reason we're here as part of all this is the comprehensive plan amendment, which is not the fee, does take a much longer process. So if you wouldn't mind considering bifurcating the process, the LDRs and the mobility fee is something that we can continue to work on. The comprehensive plan amendment is something that has to go to the state, and that's going to be a 2 to 3 month process. That's just setting the policies. That's just including the plan. That's not adopting a fee. That's not adopting any numbers. But if we can go through that, then we can come back to you and talk about the fee, because the state doesn't vote on the fee. We're not transmitting the fee, but we have to do this. We're bringing this together because this comp plan has to go before the fee. And it's going to be a much longer headway, a longer lead time before we actually get to it. So there will be more time to discuss coming back to the fee itself and the land development code.
Okay, so does that include the fee, how it's spent, where it's collected?
Correct. All the state doesn't care about any of it. The state just says, what are you doing? And what's your basis for it?
So
the ordinance, the LDRs, how it's spent, what it's calculated, that's a completely separate thing the state's not involved in.
So how the fee is calculated, you say the state's not involved in that?
It's not.
Okay. So then I might be comfortable. So you're saying you'd like us to, you'd be comfortable with us moving forward with
the comprehensive plan amendment.
But the text amendment.
The text amendment, correct. And then we could come back to you as a separate item for the land. We'll still likely present it to the commission, but they wouldn't be taking any action on it. It'd be more informational. They would be transmitting the comp plan amendment, because that's something that takes a longer time. So by the time we get that back, we'll have already met with you again. We'll have already answered your questions. We would have provided examples of this. So that's something that can be going on, and even the plan itself. You can look at some of the projects, have some time to do that, and have some questions for us back there. But the critical time component is the comp plan amendment transmittal.
All right, so that's all fair. So in that case, I'll be asking after we do a round and after public comment, I'll be asking that we continue only item 2 on our agenda.
We'll get to it when we get to it.
Yeah. Well,
We got a couple other members that want to talk. And public comment. But we'll noted, Dr. Murmur, we'll get to it at that point. Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few quick questions. Is it going to Florida Commerce only? Or is it state coordinated review for this?
So as part of the transmittal, it will go to Florida Commerce. Then Florida Commerce sends it out to the DOT, DEP, the county, all the municipalities. So they will transmit it to all these other entities that have an opportunity to review it.
So is it like that 60-day review period versus?
It's a third. So even by the time you vote for it, it's like a 2-week lag Then they have a month from once they accept everything, and then we actually have to come back and, review it. So it's basically a 60-day process from a minimum 60 upwards to 90 from the time the city commission says, let's transmit it, to the point where we're actually even able to go back before them to say, all right, now we're ready for an adoption.
Yeah.
So that, there's time to have another plan board, there's time to bring back the fee information. With the text amendment itself, that's something that's reviewed by the state, and it does take longer.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I didn't really have too many questions about the text amendment to the comprehensive plan. To me, it was pretty straightforward. It made sense. I do have just some follow-up questions just to be helpful about the fee schedule. So as I noticed, it's a set fee and then per square foot or per space per this. We're in a time where the economy is shifting costs a lot. They're fluctuating a lot. Is there any sort of recommendation for how often the city should be revisiting these fees, or is that built into that plan at all, or is it just ad hoc? Or what was the plan with that?
Florida statute requires every 4 years, and then every 5th year you have to have it adopted. So if you're familiar at all with the long-range transportation plan process, it's the same time frame. So 4 years from now, you begin another study, and then by that 5th year, you'd have it adopted. So it's not something that's going to be ongoing. Applicants aren't going to be coming up there every week or every month saying, there's a new study being done. Florida statute says you've got to wait a 4-year period.
Gotcha. And then another question I had, does this account for any internal trip capture? Is that at all relevant to the fee calculation at all?
We've looked at it in terms of certain, some uses, and because we're really capturing for one, the east and downtown, we're recommending a shorter overall trip length. And then two, we do count for bicycle, pedestrian, transit travel. Some of that does get captured in internal capture. I think an applicant will still have the ability to do a study and to make a case that they should have a higher level of, say, internal capture or some type of additional leeway to have a lower fee. So they'll be able to make that case, but have we built that in? I think we've built it in terms of the overall shorter trip lengths and based on the overall share of the projects. But it's not an actual calculation itself saying a 15% reduction for a TOD or a TND. The county does have that type of a system where they have policies in their comprehensive plan that guide traditional neighborhood development, so they do have a separate category for that. They recognize that. The city doesn't, everything in the city is mixed use for the most part, and it all is benefiting from that. So I think an applicant could make a case for it. We've accounted for some of that in our underlying trip generation numbers itself as well.
Gotcha. And last question, I know there's a lot of interest on this board. We're a very progressive housing board, particularly when it comes to affordable housing. Typically when there is affordable housing and a jurisdiction elects to do discounted or even no fee for affordable units, but it's in an apartment complex with a mix of income ranges, meaning market rate and affordable rate. I guess I assume there's precedent for it only looks at the affordable units is where you get the discount, and then the market rate is still charges just like any other full-scale apartment of market rate.
Correct. Most of the ones, they'd be guided by some type of either PUD approval agreement or what have you. So the discounts would only apply to whatever the commission says is exempt, whether it's attainable housing, which is generally up to 120% of median income, or affordable housing, which is typically 80% of affordable housing. Whatever that is, it would apply, and anything market rate would pay the fee.
Gotcha. That's all my questions. Thank you so much. Great presentation.
Mr. Ackerman.
You'll be shocked to know that the brilliant Dr. Murmer has asked most of my questions several times. The one thing I wanted to know was, the City Commission does have the ability just to exempt certain uses. For instance, we currently are trying to get ADUs established in the city. They could just exempt that.
They could make a policy decision to do that.
That's all I had left.
Okay.
Mr. Name.
It's probably a dumb question because I'm much like Dr. Murmer. I'm concerned about public transportation not being funded in the city. Now this we can't use this for operating expenses, right? Because this is,
Yeah,
these are like, you can't depend on them in that way.
These are one-time fees and they're going towards the capital facilities of it. It's not good to recognize ongoing operation cost as part of a one-time fee.
Yeah, that's what always worries me is like, well, build these great facilities, but there's not gonna be any buses going to them.
Well, my
Like the
question-
East Side Transfer Facility, we built that. Are there any buses now going there?
In my head, what I was thinking was, could this money be used to buy the buses themselves?
Right. That's part of capital.
Capital, which would be buses, your transit facilities, your transit stops, you're making stops ADA accessible. Those are all things that you could spend this on. Yeah.
No, I asked a couple different people
Yeah.
at RTS if the buses themselves were capital and couldn't get a straight answer, so.
And there's some limited instances where you can probably fund a short-term duration of services, like the county's fee has some funding for express transit for a defined year period. It couldn't just fund the overall system, and it's just an offset for it. But ultimately, in terms of transit, you need another source of revenue to fund the ongoing operations. It can help, but it's not going to fund the day-to-day needs.
Gotcha. Mr. Hill.
Yeah, sorry, just had one follow-up question. I saw on your list of projects a complete street study. Is that considered capital in this plan? That would be able to be.
Well, I mean, in terms of any type of improvement, you need planning, engineering, studies. You have to have the documentation to do that. So that is one of the recognized expenses and costs
Great.
of it.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board, or you can ask?
My question's for the chair.
Yeah, we'd have to go to public comment.
We're going to public
Yeah.
comments, so like what we would like to see in the future, we will have a
I
chance
think we're
to.
just working on the comp plan.
We can agree to split it if that's what you'd like to do, like split the
Yeah.
fee schedule from the comp plan, text changes.
Not the fee schedule, the
I mean,
text
not
amendment.
The
from
text
the-
amendment, yeah, we can
just
split the
making
two
sure.
items, yeah.
Okay.
But first, if no one else has any comments or
Yeah.
questions, we'll throw it to the public. Any members of the public have any comments on what has been a very robust discussion of mobility fees?
Fascinating discussion.
I mean, it's in a lot of ways, yes.
Uh-oh.
You'll have, 3 minutes, are we at? Okay, 3 minutes.
Has Gainesville Chamber of Commerce been like made aware of the fee schedule and that it would increase the fees?
That would be
I
a
guess.
question for our presenters.
Mr. Chair, we did reach out to the Builders Association, but not specifically the Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
We could certainly do that following this meeting.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, if I could ask you just like, I know you've already spoken before and you've said your name, but just general rule is like each new time you come to the podium, just say your name for the record.
Yes.
This does get broadcasted out. People watch this presumably.
Okay, Nick Gallo. Even though like my business isn't restaurants, I'm a friend with lots of restaurant owners, and I don't know quite what point we are with this fee schedule, and it's just kind of surprising that we're showing the fee of starting a new restaurant, and this is something even with our business that's not understood, and most people are shocked. They go, "How much was it to build this? $400,000." I'm like, the TMPA fee was $400,000, and I just don't think there's an understanding of if you're in. People say, "Man, there's no local restaurants." It's understanding a $250,000 fee to a mom and pop with a $1 profit margin on those sandwiches. Like, I actually was going to meet with the mayor and commission about, is there any way to make TMPA fees lower? And hearing they're going to be 10 to 20% higher, and then seeing how tough it is to make it as a small business. I'm just amazed that this is I was totally unaware it was happening or being voted on. I don't think any of my friends who own small locally owned restaurants are aware of it, and it definitely needs like more discussion, and we need to be able to kind of voice our opinion on the negative impact that's going to happen to being able to start a business in Gainesville. And that's pretty much my comment then.
So,
Hey,
sorry,
Mr.
I
Gallo.
need to mention something here. I understand your concern there, but you mentioned the Chamber of Commerce, and it's the Chamber of Commerce's job to monitor legislation, state, federal, and local. So the concern, like in my career, like part of my job is monitoring all of this backup and letting my organization's members know about it. So this would be a really good question to ask of the local Chamber of Commerce. Why weren't we made aware of this?
Right. Why
I'm a
is there
little
not a
surprised they didn't
single
show up.
business owner in here on the night this is being voted on?
Sorry, one more time?
Why is there not a single local business owner? I wasn't even here for this topic.
Again,
And
if
this
I were a business owner, I would be asking that question to the Chamber of Commerce because they have a government affairs person whose job it is to monitor this stuff.
Plus, we're not voting on the fee schedule.
Yeah, that's true. We're not voting on the fee schedule. I suspect, based on the discussion tonight, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for feedback on that fee schedule. I don't know that anybody on this board, just based off the questioning and my read of their questions, agrees wholeheartedly with the fee schedule as presented. I would suspect that most city commissioners would not accept that fee schedule as presented. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for discussion on it and for modification, wholesale changes perhaps even to that fee schedule. Tonight we're not voting on it. We are voting on other parts of this, but yeah, I think there will be opportunities for business owners to speak up and for the chamber to be aware of this. And
Could you rule that before there is a voting on the fee schedule, we would at least be mailed like the meeting date and the actual fee schedule?
I'm sorry, that's the job for the business community. That's the job of the Chamber of Commerce, and it's not the job for
Well,
city taxpayers to.
We meet on the same Thursday every month. And our agendas are posted online.
And the chamber has been here for other items. They are aware of our presence and they're aware of the work that we do.
And as you can see, the fees aren't going up that much relatively. I mean, it's 10%, 20%, but they're getting fees currently.
Well, downtown east side's going up.
Yeah, some of it is. I would say some of it is pretty
Some of them
significant.
are okay to go up. Okay.
You know,
Well, assuming the consultant has accurately determined the cost to the city cannot collect that, but they're going to have to pay for it somehow.
yeah.
And so it strikes me it's way more fair for the entity generating those costs to pay for them than to say every taxpayer in the city has to subsidize your business.
But my issue, it would be off topic, but my issue with the existing TMPA is, for instance, our Williston location, they said we're going to generate 601 trips per day. We don't even hit half that. So the existing fee schedule is too heavy.
What I'm saying, sorry, Mr. Gallo, what I'm saying is like tonight I think everybody, or at least the majority of the board here agrees that the only thing we should be voting on is the first step of seeking permission from our daddies and mommies up in Tallahassee. And this policy discussion is going to be continued to a later date.
Okay.
So I have your back here.
And I also don't want to get into this
Now
issue
you
where we ever
know,
get
so
in a
you
back
can
and
tell
forth
them.
with somebody who's making public comment. I
sorry.
respect as a business owner. I think it's hard to run any kind of business. Gainesville at times doesn't make it easy. I'm empathetic to that as well. Just to echo Dr. Murmur, we are going to end up picking up this fee schedule discussion at a later date. So there'll be more opportunity for feedback then and public comment. Thank you for making comment today. You're here. It's not easy to make public comment. Appreciate that. We are, in all likelihood, just going to vote on whether to send the plan that doesn't involve the fee part of the plan to Tallahassee, because that is a longer process and we want to kind of get started on that while we discuss the particulars of the fee schedule.
All right. Yes. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much.
I just had one question for staff, whether it's Mr. Wright or Mr. Edelton. Trip generations rates are used to, at least in the past, have been used currently to determine cost impacts to the transportation system. If the applicant is able to present a traffic study, would they be able to reduce said cost if they were able to demonstrate that it's well below? Right, just to be clear.
Right.
I
Mr.
thought that
Hill-
was the case in Gainesville as
Mr.
well.
Hill is correct.
Okay.
We do accept traffic studies, and it has to be done by a professional
Professional.
based on some actual evidence of some sort, but yes. And actually, we have done that for car washes.
Yeah, I assume
I remember
there's
specifically doing that for our car
big
washes.
savings in that depending on the type of use and how much is going to be generated, but yeah.
Because I mean, the trip generation that we use is from the ITE
ITE,
manual.
right.
It's a national,
Yeah.
manual. It's based on different locations, and it's not
Right.
looking specifically in Gainesville or specifically at certain types of uses. It's a lot broader than that. So
Yep.
people can always get more specific with a traffic study.
Excellent. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Sure.
I think we're still in public comment. It's been a weird one. Mr. Now, because we've been talking a lot, let's.
Are we done with the?
No, I think he was.
Do you want to go to motion part?
Make a motion.
Oh, okay, not yet. If there's anybody else present that wants to speak about this issue, by all means, you're welcome to. If not, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion and a motion.
I make a motion that we approve LD 25-000059 as presented.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Dr. Murmur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we get into this discussion of the text amendment, that's LD 25-0058. Jesus. I just want to let everybody know where my mind is at, like what kind of motion I'd like to see. I'd like to see, first, when this does come back, if we have a motion to continue to a future meeting, I would like to request that a representative from the city attorney's office be on hand to answer questions, because case law was mentioned. Once case law is mentioned on top of statutes, I get very nervous. There's not an attorney in the room, and I don't think we can provide proper advice.
There's at least one.
That's right, sorry.
Thank God.
Fair enough. But I'd like to have a municipal attorney on hand to answer any questions so we can provide the best advice possible to the city commission. I would also like staff to come forward with, in the fee schedules, exemptions to incentivize affordable housing. And by that, I mean at 80%, not 120%. Exempting affordable housing and also exempting light manufacturing, fabrication, research, laboratory stuff. These are things that there's demand here that we have the workforce, but it's difficult to find space, affordable space to have these
If I
jobs.
may, Dr. Murmur, my suggestion,
That's a
just to build off, I
complicated
don't mean to
one.
cut you off. I think my suggestion would be that I think there's a lot to discuss on the fees. And instead of directing staff to come back to us right away with certain exemptions, I don't know that the board is fully aligned on which exemptions we want and.
Oh, no, I agree. That's what I'm saying. I'm
Yeah.
not making a motion now. I'm saying
Okay,
throwing out there what I would like to see for your considerations.
got you. Thank you. Sorry, that wasn't totally clear.
Yes, no, my bad. Trying to put everyone out of their misery and get over with it fast. So.
By all means.
Yeah, so I mean, I would like to see exemptions for affordable housing, meaning at 80%. I'd like to see exemptions.
We got it.
Okay. I think we should have a broader discussion about the fees at a future meeting, because I think there's a couple of board members who aren't here that would have a lot of thoughts about this as well.
Oh, so you mean plain up, straight up?
I would try to just continue this.
Mhm.
What about requesting that a representative from the city attorney's office?
I would love to have a representative from the city attorney's office here too. Yeah, I think that's a valid concern.
That's been a request, yeah. No, we can't.
I would like to see some real world examples when they come back, because if that's part of the presentation.
Yeah, in each district,
Yes.
each district building exists under the current and the proposed schemes.
It's as much as you can do. I know there will be some instances
districts
where that
won't
will
have
not
things.
be a realistic thing to pull
I
off, but
understand.
as much as we can get real life comps essentially to really contextualize this, I think it'll be extremely helpful for the board.
100%.
And I can guarantee you it'll be very helpful for the city commission, because if the board is asking for us, I can guarantee the city commission will also be asking for it.
I just wanted to point it out to the board, is there any other, so when they come back, it sounds like, when they come back, are we intending them to come back almost like in a workshop format? We're gonna work it out in the room and then they're gonna come back again or,
I think that's the idea, yeah.
okay. Just, they have a consultant, consultants are, like myself, consultants can be expensive. So I just want to make sure that if we send them away to come back 2 more times to us for this, we're asking them for everything we want to see, right, at that workshop. So we're not asking them to come back again for another workshop, which can be costly to the city.
I think that we just shut that down though.
I think the next time they come back to us should be a workshop, and then the following time we're voting on it, But I also think if we're not gonna discuss it, like, you're gonna have a lot of workshops with the city commission. It's gonna be discussed multiple times, unless, I have a hard time thinking of a scenario where the city commission's like, oh yeah, and just approves it, like, without a lot of layered discussions about this, so. I feel like if it's not us, it's gonna be them, so, and I think I'm biased, obviously, because I'm on this board, but I think it would be better if it started with us, and then we could provide, I think, more guidance to the city commission, and it might actually lessen the overall workload on you guys. Dr. Murmur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So then, because I think the idea you just had could be really, really good. So a separate workshop, literally a workshop, so not at a future meeting. So have like a separate workshop or try to. So it's not buried in an agenda or.
Yeah, I'm conscious of the fact that it's always hard to schedule those though. So it might be a thing that, I don't know what our future agendas look like. Sometimes we have very light agendas and sometimes we have very packed agendas.
And sometimes later agendas end up being.
You don't say. So I think it would have to be part of a just regular plan board meeting. We would treat it as an item for discussion, but maybe not a non-voting item. I forget the exact wording because my brain is mush right now, but I think that would sort of be the way to handle it, Dr. Murmur.
Okay. Because most thing is to Mr. Gallo's point, would you be open to putting it at front of the agenda? That way stakeholders wouldn't have to.
I would be totally open to that, just having that discussion before we get into other business, for sure. We actually need a motion to continue this discussion. Is that not right, Mr. Addleton?
I move to continue.
Oh, wait.
Hold on, before
Go for
the
it.
motion. I just want to make sure I understand the benefit of doing a workshop versus having this as just a regular item for vote.
I think it'll just be a regular item, a discussion item.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
My suspicion is that we won't
If
vote
we
on it
present, if
anyway.
we were to present information and then the board was comfortable with it, then I would just wanted to make sure that you would have the option of voting on it and moving it forward to the commission if that was where we were at
Right.
that
At
time.
least one of us is open to that.
I doubt that I wouldn't be comfortable with it because there's still a couple things I wasn't even able to mention.
I'll
Asking
say
staff to look
that
at.
I think it doesn't hurt to have the option to vote on it, but I'm with you. I doubt that we would have the votes to move forward with it, but maybe the discussion of that would be so robust that it would put the rest of the board at ease, and then we might save a step and some money. So I'm conscious of that. I think I would be okay with that. Yeah. I just don't want to vote on it now. I don't want to vote
Understood.
on approving
Understood.
this right now, or recommending approval of this right now. I want to have another meeting on this where we can discuss this more. So let's,
I move
Motion
to
made,
to continue petition LD 25-0058 to a future meeting.
second?
Get to pass the gavel.
Second, I
You
don't
have to
think.
pass the gavel.
No, I'm saying any seconds.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
No, nobody's opposed, so motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much for that presentation. It's very detailed, very informative. Mr. Chan, if we could read, amazingly, the third item into the agenda.
Yes.
It's not a problem.
2025-515, the Gainesville Lodge Historic Designation. This is a local historic designation process for the Gainesville Lodge.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Plan Board. My presentation is not going to be that long.
Thank you in advance.
Don't worry. Hi, my name is Kathleen Kaufman. I'm the Historic Preservation Officer for the City of Gainesville. And this is a little bit of a different designation than you were probably expecting. And maybe you were able to see the designation report in the backup material. But if you haven't had a chance to look at that yet, I'm just going to run through quickly a little bit of the history of this building and why would it even be really eligible for designation. The Gainesville Lodge is at 413 West University Avenue. It's the former Travel Lodge, and it's right across the street from the Siegel Building. So it's still considered a downtown property. Let's see here. Oh, it does work. Okay. So here is Hotel Kelly. On the 1928 Sanborn map, Hotel Kelly was never really finished and opened as a hotel, and that's what became the Siegel Building. So this would be the area where it eventually is built in the early 60s, and I just wanted to show you some early Sanborn maps. So in the state of Florida, and this could be a whole nother lecture that we won't do, but travel for leisure, you know, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, really was more about wealthy Northerners coming down to Florida. And so hotels were generally, that popped up along Flagler's railroads stops, were big ordeals. They were grandiose, and they had huge ballrooms, and they had plenty of amenities for people staying there. It wasn't, oh yeah, sorry. These are the Biltmore Hotel, and that's the Biltmore Hotel in Coral Gables on the left, and then in the middle is the Flagler Hotel in St. Augustine, and one of the parlors from the Flagler Hotel. And I'm really running through that history, but so as we get to the and then you have the land boom bust of the late 1920s. You have the Great Depression, which pretty much lasted the entire decade of the 1930s. And as we come out of the Great Depression and into the 1940s, and then we have World War II. But you start with the, travel in Florida for recreation purposes really hinged on the availability of the automobile. And so as people started to be able to afford automobiles, people started traveling. And this really kind of took off after World War II also, when people were, the soldiers were coming back, and a lot of them were coming back to Florida where they had been stationed and starting to raise young families. And as you know, our population boomed. So travel became just a completely different thing, right? People did not want to go into the cities where it was a little bit more congested, a little bit more heavy traffic. They wanted places right on the side of the road where they could spend the night getting from destination A to B and have maybe an overnight stop in between. And that's when we start to see more of this, the roadside motel. And they started off as cabin camps, and maybe you've heard of the term cottage courts, where it was little cottages that they could travel to and then stay in one of the cottages. Those became motor courts, which was usually all the rooms were under one roof, one building, and then motor inns. And here is the Hilltop Motor Court from that was in Gainesville, no longer there. So in 1961, 1962, the Travel Lodge gets built in Gainesville. And the one on the left is right around the postcard, the historic postcard on the left is right around the time it was built. And as you can see in the 70s, late 70s is the postcard on the right. It already has undergone a color paint scheme, but it is pretty typical of the roadside motels that were being built in the 60s, and they were picking up elements of what we call mid-century modern. So you have this, like these long, large vertical pylons. Those are also on the outside of every exterior staircase. You have this breeze block feature, which is really a typical feature of mid-century modern. And there's little Sleepy Bear on the wall. We'll get to Sleepy Bear in a minute. The interesting thing about this is that I-75 was just getting started. Construction through Alachua County started in 1961. And so that is why, if you have any long-term history, if you've been here a while in Gainesville, you know that a lot of our roadside motels were along 441. Because before there was ever I-75, 441 or 13th Street was the major north-south artery to get from south of Gainesville to north of Gainesville, and that is where a lot of the roadside motels were. So this is an interesting case because it kind of was built right in downtown at that point, instead of where all the other motels were being built. The Sleepy Bear, in 1954, the Travelodge Corporation, which by the way started in San Diego, California, and then just spread. It was a very successful, and it still is a very successful company. They don't really use the Sleepy Bear logo anymore. It kind of faded out around 2012. But in 1954, he was all the rage. He was on a multitude of their stationery and the ashtrays that were in every room. Sleepy Bear was on it. He was on all their promotional materials. And there are still 2 doors at the Gainesville Lodge that have the Sleepy Bear on the door. This is just a close-up of the, it's what we call breeze block wall. And I included this postcard from High Point, North Carolina, because it's almost the exact same layout as the Gainesville configuration. So I thought that was interesting.
Wait, so the pictures on the left are from Gainesville?
The construction?
No, the pictures on the left, those are from...
Yes. These are from our Gainesville one, and this is just a postcard of the North Carolina one. And a lot of you probably remember some of the motels because some of them only were recently demolished. The Bambi Motel, the Florida Motel, and all of these were along 441. So since we have so few of these motels left, that also makes the former Travelodge kind of unique in that it's one of the last of its kind in the city of Gainesville. Now, it's not like the most amazing architectural resource. So it only qualifies for designation under one of the criteria. And that criteria is criterion B, that it embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction. And it does embody the type and period of construction of roadside motels in the 60s and 70s. But because it only fulfilled one criteria in the Historic Preservation Ordinance, that requires that at least 6 Preservation Board members had to vote in favor of it. But all 8, it got unanimous approval. All 8 voted yes for it. And as part of our language in the Preservation Ordinance, it comes through this board before going to City Commission. So that's why I'm here before you, and that's the end of the presentation. I would say that this was owner initiated. It's got a brand new owner, and actually, if you go by it, you will see that they are already starting work on it. They've taken off actually, let me just point one thing out to you. I know you're done with tonight, but let me just point one thing out to you. Right here along the front, there were some like later like classical elements, some weird columns added to the front. Those have already been removed, and they are repainting it. They're trying to make it more of a boutique motel. And Anthony Lyons is one of the owners who just bought it. He apologizes profusely for not being here tonight to talk to you himself, but it is his anniversary, and he said his wife would kill him. So that is what they're doing. They want to make it into a boutique motel. To maybe help with some of the work, they would like it designated so they could take advantage of the tax exemption. And in case you want to know how that works, that does not get rid of taxes for a property. Like if you are designated historic and you take advantage of the tax exemption, you still have to pay the taxes on the property that you have been paying. But what it does is if you do work to a property, if you provide additional value to a historic building, it allows you to be still taxed at the original rate of the value of your building before the work. And it gives you a few years to be exempt from having it jump up incrementally just because of the work you did. So don't think it's like a complete exemption of the taxes. It is not, or people would be banging down my door to get their properties designated. But that's what their plan is.
Great. I can see there already there's a lot of questions from the board. I have a few questions too. This particular travel lodge has seen, according to the backup, a significant number of structural alterations from the original one. And in fact, the postcard there, it doesn't look like that anymore. Roof is different, there's no pool. The pool is a real defining feature of a lot of these roadside inns. It's just a concrete pad now. Is there a precedent for a structure like this with this many significant structural alterations being designated a historic structure?
There is, because there's enough of the original structure left where you can recognize it. The roof is an interesting thing because actually they have talked about maybe returning it to a flat roof. They have not fully decided on that yet because that would be a significant undertaking. The pool, a lot of the pools, unfortunately, a lot of the pools at these roadside motels have been filled in because of insurance purposes. They're very hard to keep open and safe. But the enclosure is going to be returned to this configuration. They're going to get rid of the weird wall that's also been placed on top of the original breeze block wall. But they're going to be returned. The breeze block pylons are still there, and some of the exterior features are still there.
I guess what if they don't, though? I mean, this is like they're going to do this, and I guess we're taking them at their word. But what if they don't, and then it looks largely the same as it looks now? I'd have a hard time believing that's a historic structure. It feels, and frankly, of the era, like we're talking about, it's not like a Victorian house or something. This was made to be put up rather cheaply, and so that plus the alterations, and if they restore it to what it used to be, I could see a stronger case for it. But I think we have to vote on it based on what it looks like now versus what a developer says they may or may not do.
Right, which is why it's not being designated for its artistic merit. It's being designated on the fact that there's one of the eligibility requirements in the preservation ordinance is that if it signifies a type of development that was predominant in the city of Gainesville, which this does, then it contributes to the character of the development of the city.
Do we know what number travel lodge this was? They started, like you said, they started in San Diego. I think it was like in the 30s or something like that. Is there any kind of historic significance to this being like travel lodge number 10 or something, or 15?
No, I'm sure it wasn't 10. By the time they got to Florida, they were already in the hundreds.
Okay. I'll let other board members ask their questions, and I might come back with some more. Thank Thank you. Mr. Nay.
You answered my first question by saying, what is the benefit of them doing the historic preservation? Because I didn't really understand that. Also, when that historic preservation, if it passes or whatever, us and then the city commission, does that mean in perpetuity this is going to be historically we're stuck with it forever? You know, my problem with, and people yell at me because they say I'm against historic preservation, even though my degree's in history. When I look at places like, Washington, D.C., they built the Cleveland Park Metro system, and they wanted to build some dense housing next to the metro stop. Well, there was an old, the first, what is it called? Strip mall built in Washington, D.C., and because the neighbors wanted to stop it, they made it a historic site. So now there's a strip mall next to high density transportation. Now this isn't like that, but still should be a dense area, and we're preserving something that's car centric because it is a motel. And I'm just worried that if we're gonna freeze this in amber, that it can't be anything else later on.
Well, you bring up a couple, there's a couple responses to that. And the first is that this was owner initiated. And if a future owner wanted to undesignate it, they could certainly go through that process to undesignate it. The second thing of interest that you bring up is that a lot of people think that you can't do anything to historic buildings, that it's frozen just like that, which is not the case. I mean, we often see additions and heights added to historic buildings as long as they're done sensitively and compatibly to the rest of the building. That's often something that happens to historic buildings.
So we could add a 14-story student housing on top. I'm sorry.
It's just like,
If I add, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Hamilton.
So to really just to add, like I said, to Kathleen's point here, really the ask is for the designation gives the property owner the ability to ask for relief from taxes on improving the property. If there is a change or a desired change for this site in some way or another, it would then go back to the same board that just requested approval unanimously.
Right. I think the discussion here, and I'm frankly surprised the Historic Preservation Board approved this unanimously. I think my concern is that if we approve this to be a historic building, what isn't a historic building? I think the bar will be set so low that it will basically cheapen the historic designation to include just about anything. There are still some pretty crappy motels that have been around forever on 13th Street. We could make those historic, historic things. We could make the Super 8 over by Archer Road a historic building in 20 years. I don't think those should be historic buildings. I don't think that people building it, I think if you ask the architect of the Gainesville Travel Lodge, hey, do you think this is a historic building if they're still alive? I think they'd laugh, because that's not what it was meant to be. It was meant to be cheaply made to take advantage of people coming in and needing a cheap place to stay. And that's it. And I'm really surprised that unanimously, it just doesn't make sense. I wonder what they're looking at, because I go by that. I'm sympathetic to the project of rehabilitating that. There's a lot of cool rehabilitations of motels. I've stayed in a couple in Portland and in Los Angeles. Very cool project. That this is a historic building, I really struggle with that. It just, I mean, we've got like old Burger Kings and McDonald's. Are those historic? It's not even the first Travel Lodge. It's number 100 something or other, maybe. Like, what's the narrative there? That we've knocked over the Bambi Motel because there was a lot of prostitutes there and crime and stuff, and people didn't want it around, and now all of a sudden we got to preserve the Travel Lodge? I think we were knocking down these places for a reason. They just didn't serve a purpose anymore, or the purposes they did serve were considered so unsavory by the city of Gainesville that we felt motivated to demolish them without complaint, without reservation, without regret. And so that, to me, that's the big point with this thing. I don't see it. I just don't see it, but I'm sure other people have opinions on it. Dr. Murmur has his light going on, so I'm going to
Uh-oh.
defer to him.
So someone else can talk, or?
Let's we'll do it by lights.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. So I have a strange request, and it's not because I'm trying to rush you or us, but just to ensure that I'm able to process any information you give me. Within 3 minutes, can you justify how saving this or designating this hotel as a historic preservation site helps maintain, I know preservation is often mentioned.
Helps maintain preservation what?
I know preservation is also mentioned this term sense of place. How does preserving this hotel help further that sense of place on that part of university right now? Because this was mentioned when it was mostly for motor vehicle traffic. It was a little strange because it was off of 441. Right? So what benefit do we inure beyond the site itself? Does the surrounding area receive any benefit from designating this as a historic preservation site?
I think you need to first separate the fact that what the motel has looked like for the last 20 years is not what they're trying to replicate in the current, restoration process. Originally, as it was built, it did typify like the mid-century motels that were everywhere, and now they're not. So it is a limited resource that we no longer have most of these hotels. There is enough. I have been personally to the site. Like I said, it's not a Victorian home. It's not high style, but it does exhibit and retain enough of the mid-century features that if you look at it once restored and you look at the original postcards, you will definitely see the same building.
So what I mean is, maybe I didn't phrase my question very well. I'll try again. When we voted to recommend designating the Florida Theater as a historic preservation site, two things there. One, we knew that the direct concrete benefit they were going to get was an opportunity to get grant money to restore it. Bingo. Number two, the benefit for the surrounding area as well as the whole town is this could be a music venue that we can all use and enjoy. In this case, you're talking about a boutique motel. We're talking about a direct benefit of a tax break, not complete tax exemption, but a tax break for a boutique hotel, a profit-generating boutique hotel that isn't going to be enjoyed by the masses of Gainesville.
I would add one thing too. The Florida Theater had a very robust historic narrative behind it that I don't think you find here with a travel lodge.
But the interior was completely gutted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the goal is to have it as a nice motel, and they're planning a restaurant and a cafe, like a cafe and a bar as well at this site. So the goal
Will
is
it be
not
open
to
the
have it.
public?
Sorry.
The cafe, the bars, like other than the rooms, can the public do whatever they want in the hotel? Like, is it going to be open to the public? Like, what benefit do city residents get from this? Because there is a cost to it. The cost
It is
it's
definitely an
cost of
improvement.
losing property tax revenue.
It is definitely an improvement from the kind of motel that is there now.
That's for sure.
That's fair. That is fair.
I do think that this project will go forward regardless, right?
Okay, we've got it.
All right.
So I've had only Bob can ask questions.
First of all, I apologize. We have treated you absolutely shamelessly. I really am sorry, myself included. Weirdly enough, I came to Gainesville in 1974 to go to law school, and within a week, my uncle was staying at that motel, and because he was a traveling salesman. I do think there's benefit to having this motel downtown because it will provide some much needed rooms. We do not have a lot of hotel rooms downtown. It is just a motel, assuming it's a modest, defrayal of some taxes. I don't have a problem with it. I happened to drive through it just for nostalgia the other day because my uncle's not with us anymore, and they were hard at work fixing it up. I was impressed. And I was wondering if the pool was still there. I'd missed that if I had. But anyway, I don't have a problem with this, particularly if it can be undesignated, if something in the future comes that seems like a better use for this property. But I don't think there's any reason why we should turn down the expertise of the Historic Preservation Board. I think we should just do it and see how it turns out. I wouldn't mind having a better place to stay other than the Hampton Inn, you know.
Mr. Chair, may I
Yeah,
respond to that?
absolutely.
Actually, your anecdote reminded, I just wanted to let you know that when we did bring this to the Historic Preservation Board, some of the people in the audience actually got up to talk about their memories of, and someone had their wedding reception here. So, I mean, it has not been a pleasurable place to look at the last 20, 25, 30 years. But there are still people in town that do have many good memories of this place, and that maybe shouldn't be discounted so easily.
Well, I would also volunteer, because of the siting it has a relatively modest presence on University Avenue. You can drive by it all the time and never see it. Other than you have to drive through that little tunnel at the beginning. Most of it's, I mean, it looks like an old Holiday Inn. And if they fixed it up, I think that would be fine.
Mr. Nay.
Bob says I'm being too mean, so I'm not going to speak.
I have no such issues, but Mr. Adelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully, just to add that, the city has a lot of tools, obviously, to try to incentivize making changes to the city and to the development itself. In this case, historic preservation, architectural value aside, which I am sadly not a professional of, and gratefully have professionals that can really speak to this in a way that I cannot. In process, I can speak to. In incentives, I can speak to. And in this case, this is a tool or a method that the city can use essentially at no cost to the city to try to incentivize making an existing location better, to try to incentivize that developer and that property owner to do these improvements to make it better.
But there is a cost, right? This wouldn't be coming up if it was like no cost to the city and not an impact. I think that this is being presented a little bit like a binary. If we do this, this development will go through. If we don't do this, they won't improve the motel. But that's not true. They're already improving the motel. They're already working on it. And I don't know that, the applicant's not here, unfortunately, but I don't know that it's a case where if this isn't, if we don't make a travel lodge a historic building, that they won't bother fixing it up. As I understand, I have some knowledge of the project, and as I understand it, it's been in the works for a while, and it's been planned for a bit. And I think they would probably go through with it regardless of whether we decided to designate a travel lodge as a historic building. And so I don't know. I think this framing, and it's come through on some comments of the board too, like, yeah, I want to see that. I want to see the motel restored. I would love to see more hotels in Gainesville, especially in downtown. I think it's needed. I think there's a potential for this to be a very cool project. That's not what I'm voting on here. If it was voting on the project, sure, yeah, absolutely. I think what we're voting on here is this a historic structure? The Travelodge, like Travelodge 135, is that a historic structure? I know I'm not a historic preservation person. That's not my area of expertise. I am a person who drives around and looks at stuff. And like, I think if you asked 100 people in Gainesville, is that a historic structure? I think at least 90 of them would laugh. I mean, I really do. How is that any different than the Holiday Inn on 13th and University? That's been around forever. People have had weddings there and all sorts of great experiences. People have had great experiences and events at almost any kind of place you can gather in. It doesn't necessarily mean that that place is historic. that we should preserve it, that we should lower the bar, I think, for what's a historic building. My concern is if we say that the Travelodge 135 or whatever is a historic building, that we will get applications, people asking and making the case based off of this, that like, oh, well, why isn't this building? Why isn't Gator Bev a historic building? Why isn't this a historic building? You know, and I think it's a weird slippery slope that we're going to enter in, because I don't know, I have a hard time believing that's historic, you know?
Mr. Chair, I would call the question, please.
Okay.
So you can have some, that means we get to vote, but we can ask for.
Sure.
We know what that means.
Yeah, I know what that means. Mr. Appleton had his light on, Dr. Murmur had his light on.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I move to recommend.
We got to have public comment on this.
Oh,
I
sorry.
think. Yeah.
He called the question, so.
Okay. Is there any members of the public that would like to comment on the virtue and value of this item? By all means. And please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Blair. I'm the general manager of the Gainesville Lodge. I joined this project because I was a Gator. I have worked all over the country in hotels. And when I majored in hospitality at UF, there was nothing like this. And when I found this project, I was so excited about it. I think that there's so much history to it. One of the things that I envision happening is hosting people that have stayed there previously and have the memories of their uncles being there, or, you know, being here for a game in the 80s. To answer the question about restaurants, the restaurants would be open for the public. And I think that based on the Historical Society and what they have determined that it could be a historical site, I think that it could be in Gainesville. I think it's really important. I think, you know, going to 13th Street and having all of those motels being taken down and those signs being taken down, it reminds me of the sign depot in Las Vegas, where they kept all of those signs from all of those years. And people go and they visit that because it's something cool to do in Vegas. And I think that this could be something cool to do in Gainesville, knowing that it's a historic site. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak on this? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for a discussion or a motion. Dr. Murmur.
I'm about to make a motion, but really quick, I did want to point out, Ms. Kaufman, I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to pile on or anything, but my concern is that there was one finding. There's a special procedure that had to be made because of there just being one finding, and I just want to defend what I'm about to do. I think that's fair for me to do. The project is being worked on. I do not see the benefit of, I don't feel comfortable giving a tax break to somebody who was previously very closely associated with the city through this method. So for that reason.
Is there a motion in here?
For that reason, Bob.
Chill out, man.
You gotta let people have their say sometimes, Bob. That's fine. Dr. Murmur.
For that reason, I move to recommend recommend to the City Commission that we deny designating the Gainesville Lodge a historic building.
Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
All those in favor of a motion to deny, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
The ayes take it. The board has voted to deny a historic designation, or recommend denial, I should say, of historic designation.
we're
It
just
will
gonna
still
try
go
to,
to the City Commission for their opinion.
It's fine.
Thank you for the presentation. Moving on to member comment. I don't know if anybody has anything left to talk about. Dr. Murmur.
Really quick, sorry, this is going back to the mobility program text amendment. Do you need Mr. Eggleton, do you need an official motion to formally request that a representative from the city attorney's office be present when this comes back? Okay, and do you need a formal motion, Mr. May mentioned this, to bring a real life examples version of this table? Okay.
I don't need that. I believe that staff heard very clearly what you guys would like to see when they come back.
Great. Make sure. Thank you.
All right, if that's it, the next meeting of the plan board? Oh, no, it's not. Mr. Nay is ready to leave.
I did want to ask staff, because we have all those uses and things, like when that stuff might be coming back. I understand you guys are understaffed, and I imagine Brittany's going to be out soon, right? For a while, so I took completely understanding of all that. I'm just asking for an update.
Yes, I appreciate it. So we are moving forward with it in a couple of different ways. And yes, also Brittany will be out by the end of the week, next week at the latest. So for those questions and coordinations, Mr. Chan, of course, reach out to him. And then I am also here, and I will be here. So for at least one of those items, the alcohol beverage item that we brought up, GPD is moving forward with pulling the data that the city commission has asked for, and we are still moving forward with researching that. The uses themselves, this board, you all have discussed looking at either the uses themselves as the use table or looking at it through zoning and the zoning change. The city commission has also discussed that and asked for staff to move forward with evaluating zoning changes that look at these uses both citywide but with specific focus on Southwest Gainesville and South Main Street. So we're moving forward with that. And that is a part of the scope of work that we're trying to identify for either how we do it, either on the staff side or if we go and reach out for third-party consultants to move forward with that. But it's on the table. We are moving forward with it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Ackerman.
Just a brief comment. It would be nice if the board would recognize that our wordiness eats up a lot of everybody else's time. So there are people sitting out here waiting for us to do something, and I wish would be economical.
No. Any other member comments? Oh, there's one.
I'm sorry.
Kind of defeating Bob's point here. Just kidding. What's your name?
I was just thinking, we used to get attendance reports, because I know we are having staff, I want to make sure we always have a quorum, because I've come here in the past and not had a quorum. We have pretty good attendance, but I just want to make sure that, I imagine staff's looking at it, but we have folks that are consistently absent.
Well, I'll mention that Nate has been, Mr. Chan has been sending out, and I'm sorry that I've not been replying to those.
Did he? Did I not see it?
Requesting. Well, he's been sending out.
Oh, okay.
Emails
Asking.
all of us asking if we're coming.
Oh, so
I do think he's doing.
They might have
they're doing
excused
their-
absences. I got you. Sorry.
I think you've been keeping track on the size, so. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I figured as much. That's why
We hate your wordiness.
Do you read the rules and do anything about it?
Sorry, was that extra words, Bob?
Can we not?
Do you ever read the rules and do anything, take action on?
We 100% have.
Yeah, so we have been we take attendance at all the meetings, and we have been looking at just attendance of all the board members and whether they have broken any of the rules of the city plan board for attendance. We haven't found that has occurred for this year, at least.
So is it rolling in that way? Is it like January to December, like every year it rolls like that way?
I do believe it resets every year, and there are excused absences as well.
How many excused absences do you have? I'm sorry.
I have it pulled up.
I'm sorry.
I mean,
I can look
how
at
many
that
are
stuff
you,
myself.
How many are you, is there like a number of excused absences you can get in a year? I forget what the rules are around that.
Because Jason's going to be absent next month.
So give him a moment to look it up, please. It's like.
Can we give you all an attendance report?
Yeah, I don't mean to be like singling out particular members, and that's,
I'm not.
I think it was more just an ask of the criteria, and then Bob answered my question. Thank you, Mr. Ackerman. that it's 3, then you get 3 excused absences in a year, and so I think it's 3, and I forget, I'm gonna ask you because you know Mr. Ackerman. It's unexcused is 2, something like that, or how much is that? 3 unexcused before there's 13?
That was 2.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Thought it was 2.
It's been lovely.
Yeah.
I have it pulled up if you'd like me to read it.
Sure.
Sure. So, any appointee to the board shall be automatically removed upon filing with the clerk of the commission an attendance record that indicates the board member has failed to attend 4 or more consecutive meetings, or the member's overall attendance record is less than 66.66% for the 6 most recent board meetings at which voting occurred. Attendance does mean that presence at a meeting for the duration of at least 50% of the entire meeting. So therefore, leaving early would may count as not attending. And board members may be granted 1 excused absence per calendar year for medical reason or professional or educational obligation.
Okay.
So it's a rolling 6 months then, it's not like, it doesn't reset January 1st.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I leave it in the capable hands of city staff to decide what they. You guys keep the attendance. I'm sure you guys will know what to do with that. Next meeting is July 24th, 2025, and this meeting is mercifully adjourned.